Hello everyone and welcome back to Fleet's Random Ramblings. Yes, I'm back from Finland. I know, shocking. It's been a fair old while, but yes, I am now back. Back from my Finnish holiday. Yeah, I did. I did enjoy my holiday in Finland. It was great fun, actually. Saw some sights, spent some time with the family. Hello, Lego Ship Nerd. Nice to see you. I'm fine, thank you. Be interesting to see who we get since, well, it's late. I don't know if I'll get any co-hosts or not. Never mind, Foxo just pops up out of nowhere.
And I will arrive.
Anyone else coming?
Dragon's eating. I should be here in a bit.
Fair enough.
I'm also recently bought and is now playing Cyberpunk.
Well, I'm back from Finland. I had a good holiday. Did lots of swimming. There goes the doctor off to go do more ship adjustments. Well, it's nice to be back. Wonder what changed while I was away. Anything interesting happened while I've been gone?
Good to see you, Master Chief. Things aren't going well.
Oh, for God's sake, I knew
Well,
you...
RBG stepped on a landmine.
What did RPG do?
Stepped on a landmine. Did we not listen in?
Yes, but... Yeah, but no, the thing... No,
Fell
what...
below 9,000 members, did you know that? Mental stun lock.
No, what I...
Oh, Fleet lives.
No, what I mean is, RBG stepped on a landmine. What exactly did he do?
What? Oh, that!
Oh,
Don't
that,
worry
some
about it.
people refuse to elaborate. Alright, I won't worry about it.
You know...
Don't worry about it. You do RBG. You just probably haven't clicked yet. I'm gonna be my mic while I'm doing cooking, but good to see you back, Fleet.
Someone send me a DM about whatever the hell happened.
I've just been DM'd not to, so...
Why? Why do I not need to know?
Because it's funnier.
No, it's not. I don't like not knowing.
You don't need to know. You don't need to know shit.
I do not.
What you do?
I need to know.
What you do need to know, however, is that we fell below 9,000 server members, which means that any celebration that we could have had on surpassing 9,000 members is now no longer a good point. We can no longer have that celebration.
Yay!
No,
we should
it's
have to kill more
amazing.
corporate types.
Yeah, the servers are dying.
Good.
What do you mean, good?
Blood got skill for the skill throne and all that shit.
No.
Wellesley T. Collingwood is going to break our minds with stupid questions and stupid
Unlike.
There's no such
Trust
thing
me,
as a
there's no
stupid
way in hell
question.
you can break it. Yes, there is.
Well,
just as long as they're not
Dragon,
naval shit, I
Dragon.
don't care
That's just something I have to say.
I don't care about naval shit. I'm just here for this. I'm just here for stupid questions.
Indeed.
Yeah.
This doesn't surprise
And
me.
I'm just here to listen to stuff while I'm doing cooking.
I've got
I
smooth.
didn't realise Fleet was home
I
yet.
have kebab!
I literally got
Nice.
home at 1 o'clock this morning.
See, that's the reason my Domino's has been so late recently.
You mean
I don't work there anymore.
I know. You don't work there anymore? Oh, no wonder then. Jesus Christ. Slacking fleet.
No, I don't want to work there. It was doing my car a mischief.
I mean, Foxo is now effectively missing out on Domino's.
Anyway,
And
can we have some
it
questions,
explains shit.
please?
Preferably stupid ones.
Also, RBG landmine, explain.
Uncomfortable silence tells me they're either typing up a storm or you're not getting shit. Ah, I just said no naval ones, for goodness sake. I like naval stuff. It's all gooey and salty and icky. Indeed.
I just stole someone's ribcage.
You said you actually got back at 1 in... It was like 1 AM or 1 PM? Uncomfortable silence tells me you got back at like 1 AM.
I did, that's what I said. 1 AM. That's literally...
You said you got back at 1, you never elaborated. You never elaborated.
Oh,
You
this
could've
is
got back
this
in
question
one
was,
direction.
This question was made for Foxo.
On?
What if all British battle
One
cruisers
Yamato.
at Jutland were replaced by Admiral class battle cruisers? That question was made for you.
Then
The
they
battle
don't run away
cruiser
from the high
queen.
seas fleet. The high seas fleet gets fucking clapped.
Go on then, Foxo. Break it down. Let's have an actual proper breakdown for once. Go on. How do you think the Admirals would do in detail? Break it down. Let's hear it. I'm actually intrigued. You're the girl
Well,
boss when it
it's a
comes to
case
battle
of-
cruisers.
They're faster than the high seas fleet. Unlike the British battle cruisers at Jutland, they have the Admiralty fire control, which means they can out-hit and out-shoot anything at Jutland. And the German battle cruiser's advantage of the heavier armour is negated by the 15-inch 42. Combine into account that due to advances in loading and the actual barbette design over the... Well, it had come in on Tiger and the Congos, will allow for a much faster rate of fire. The Kiwis also have it. But if they're all Admiral class, then you've got a force the Germans can't deal with. Because they're outranged, they're outsped. Depending on which version of the Admiral class we're going. Because if we're going off basically Hood, then they've got more. Then they're better protected than a lot of ships, even the dreadnoughts there. And you get, well, it's essentially a defeat in detail for the Germans, unless they get lucky. Because the best of will in the world, the German battle cruisers are fucked.
Well, yeah, obviously. I mean, that was a given. It's more what happens when the high seas fleet rocks up. Like I don't doubt the Hoods. All of the admirals are going to live. That's just that
Alright.
makes sense. It's more what damage do they do to the high seas fleet when / if do they choose to disengage? This is the thing. Because yeah, like they're good, but that's an awful lot of German battleships coming the other way. At some point, they are going to have to choose to break and disengage.
It's all going to depend on how the high seas fleet reacts.
I mean, the best thing to
Because-
do is the best thing the
if-
high seas fleet can do is chase. Because if they choose to run, that's playing into the admiral's hands. The best thing to do is to close or attempt to.
The best thing to do is orderly retreat. Because the German battleships, they're not as good as the Admiral class, but they have numbers of vessels on their side.
So you're saying literally pull a Jutland, battle turn away, orderly battle turn away, and just go the other direction.
It's not even that. It's a case of slowly turn away, but keep the formation at all cost, and essentially have your have your dreadnoughts act as a herd. So, because the danger is if the battle cruisers can corral the high seas fleet, because the Grand Fleet's got a higher cruising speed and a higher top speed.
Yeah. Like some parts of
the Admiral class. Oh god.
Like some parts of the high seas fleet can actually cruise at the same speed as the Grand Fleet, but that's the kicker. Some. Not all. And that's the high seas fleet's big weakness that everyone misses. It's not about the individual ships. The Grand Fleet can move as a unit. Some of the high seas fleet's dreadnoughts can't keep up, and they can't be left behind.
Yeah. In this case, it all comes down to the Germans split up to try and save their older vessels, probably their newer vessels, when they see the Grand Fleet coming, and then sort of take the risk of that the battle cruisers don't essentially perform hunting dog tactics on them, where as they split up, all the battle cruisers go after a single split off squadron, sink it. Because if all the battle cruisers are admirals, one-on-one, or if the German fleet splits up, the admirals are going to take the fight.
Absolutely,
even if
absolutely.
they deplete strength.
Yeah, makes sense, completely.
And it's a case of, I don't know if the high seas fleet would risk a hard turn away and risk breaking up the formation. Because that's what the battle cruisers would want.
Makes sense there, yeah, I get that.
And the counterpoint is because the trajectory the high seas fleet's on will lead them directly to the Grand Fleet.
Yep.
And it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation.
Your best hope, honestly, their best hope at that point is to break away and damn what casualties we suffer. Because that's their best hope. Is break away and just hope it's not that bad. Like those.
I hate to agree with you, but yeah. But I can see the issue with that being that aside from other Bayerns at Jutland again.
No. There's only Bayern and she's working up.
Okay. Because I forget, because she's in some. Is she in the battle after it?
Nope. I don't know. No, she doesn't work up until she doesn't fully finish working up until late to 1916.
The Bayerns are the two ships that could deter the Admiral class effectively by themselves.
There are two ships.
Yeah,
that's it. I'm sorry, you've got like if you're talking about the battle cruiser fleet being turned into admirals, because that's what the question is. You're looking at 7 admiral class. That's terrifying.
Yeah, it is. Well, why do you think the Americans fought so hard to make sure Hood was the only one allowed to exist?
The thing is, though, but like 2 Bayerns are not going to deter that force from just doing whatever the hell it likes. In fact, the actual
thing is,
the constraint on it might actually be fuel oil reserves.
But looking at it from pure tactical, Yeah, but to turn the admirals, because the Bayerns are built like brick shit houses,
They are, but
and they can take a shit ton of punishment.
But
And
this is
they
what I'm
feel
curious.
out.
But there's
Here's just a
seven-
quick question to add on. Is all of the battlecruiser fleet hoods, or is it just what we know of as the battlecruiser? Is the
No,
Invincibles
it's
also
not
turned
all
into hoods.
British battle cruisers. It's the sorry. Oh, never mind. It's all British battle cruisers. That's 9. Oh dear, that's worse.
Yeah, that's what I was curious about.
That's
So,
worse. That's
that's
infinitely
horrifying.
worse. The
I
high
mean,
seas
it's not,
fleet
though.
is dead.
Well, that's what it is.
Because
wouldn't
one
say
thing
that-
the Royal Navy learnt the hard way is that the Admiral class are fucking
What?
hungry. It wouldn't be good for that, because they've still got to make the 15-inch shells. And if I'm remembering correctly, the QEs didn't go into Jutland with full magazines. Or if they did, they went in with a different balance than what they should have. Which, needless to say, that's not a good thing. And it turns in. Because, yeah, it's all gonna come into how do the Germans react to the battlecruiser. And to finish the point about the Bayerns fleet,
Yeah.
that I was getting at is, it doesn't. The Bayerns themselves aren't going to solo the battlecruisers.
Hmm.
But it's the Bayerns in the context of the fleet. Where the QEs can't turn it into where the Admirals can't turn it into a 2v1. Because they've got the rest of the High Seas fleet to contend with.
Hmm. I suppose.
And it becomes a case of the Bayerns, if the Admirals push the fight, a Bayern will beat an Admiral. Because the Bayern can take a fucking pounding. The Admirals are still built like battle cruisers. You make a lot of sacrifices for 32 knots.
I see.
And so it does just the thing of.
Also, there's basically no Washington Naval Treaty because the IRA can just go, we are just supreme now. There is literally fuck all any of you fuckers can do to stop us.
Oh, there's still gonna be a Washington Naval Treaty. But the RN and the US Navy will want the disarmament.
No,
It's just
like there's no reason that the thing is, if the RN's choice is naval treaty in which we give up all of our admirals that we've got for free, or
yeah. It's going to be a different treaty, but it's still going to be a treaty. And it might be a case of
they'll probably
yeah.
or it'll probably be a clause where the admirals are set as like the specs of the admirals are set as the treat, like 16-inch guns, 40,000 tons. Like, slightly larger tonnage, and there's no building holiday. So basically, the British are given a building holiday. They can't build anything. And America and Japan are allowed to replace, like, there are the tonnage limits, but America and Japan are allowed to replace their ships. But that's it. While the Brits are stuck in a building holiday.
I mean, maybe, but the Americans, all the admirals are going to do is make them go, oh shit, we need Lexingtons now. And the Americans can build all 6 of them. But I don't think anyone's going to contest that. And the big thing's going to be, Japan's going to be the second-rate power in this treaty. Which, I don't want to imagine how that's going to affect Japan.
just want to get this out of the way really quick, considering the question's been up for like 15 minutes. One Yamato-sized PT boat versus 100 PT boat-sized Yamatos. 100 PT boat-sized Yamatos, easily. More guns.
No. You have to take into account the scale of the 3-inch PT boats.
Right.
Now, directly, 1-for-1, scale that thing up to the size of a Yamato. How big's that single 3-inch gonna be?
I thought the guns didn't scale. Or, if the guns did scale, then... Okay, if the guns did scale, then yeah, the one Yamato-sized PT boat would win easily.
Just like, yes, I have one weapon. Massive cannon.
Yeah, that's literally all they need. If the weapons didn't scale, then it would be 100 PT boat-sized Yamatos. And the scale of 50 cals.
Ooh, I
And
know.
the torpid scale as well. Yeah. You got blasts ranging somewhere in the several kilotons.
Okay.
That's all.
Ah, we've got 9 people. Excellent. It would be funny if the ship-shape crew listen to ramblings while they're in...
Who?
You know, the ship-shape crew. Hi, Paul. Finland was nice. I enjoyed it.
You've lost.
How drunk did you get?
Not really. It turns out the stereotypes have got it wrong. It's not alcohol the Finns consume in vast amounts. It's caffeine.
All I'm going to say, Fleet, is don't tempt fate. Though I do need to actually say thank you to Clark, admittedly.
Why?
Oh?
He basically saved one of my friends.
What?
One of my friends was in Finland. Was in Sweden at the same time. Ended up actually being on the same hotel boat as them, as well as Drac.
Saved?
And his phone got damaged, and basically they helped him
Aw.
find out where to go and do stuff. Apparently, it was quite a good conversation over breakfast. Talking with the ship-shape crew, Clark and Drac.
It always is. Whenever I get a chance to talk to them, it's always amazing. I hope they're enjoying themselves.
PT-sized Yamatos.
They must be, surely. This point.
What are your thoughts on the Cimmerian class oiler? Do you think hands down the best oiler designed in World War what? World War II? Since it's quick
Haven't we had
enough
this
and
question?
large enough for support. No, it was different. For supporting long-range naval operations.
I think we have had this question, and we agreed that it was one of the best.
It is one of the best, but it is somewhat expensive. It's basically an oiler only the USN can really build in the Second World War.
I think the RN could build them, they just don't have necessarily the same need.
No, this is what I mean. The RN, in the Second World War, the RN doesn't need a Cimmerian-style oiler. Also, there's a kind of problem with they need, more merchant hulls in the water. They can't really afford to build fast deluxe tankers when they just need tankers. Lots of tankers. All the tankers. And also, there's also the whole thing with we have bases everywhere. The RN doesn't really need a Cimmerian type. Brackman asks, what kind of ship will the Germans have built to counter the... Go on.
Well, the Royal Navy has something even better than the Cimmerian type. They have SS Ohio. If anyone's heard of her.
No, I have not.
The oil tanker in Operation XS limped into Malta, having been hit by 4 one-ton bombs. More pure high explosives was dropped in her and she survived than it took to sink some fleet carriers.
She had to be scuttled in order to offload her cargo, and she never sailed again. But it's apparently still, but it's apparently Malta considered the savior of the island. Apparently.
Yes. So she was transferred to and then refloated and eventually used for naval fire practice. Yeah, 10 inches of rope was used to tow her. Yeah, so it's just That is one of the sad things on naval history. You never hear of the civilian ships that did
No.
batshit insane
No, it is a
during
shame.
wartime.
It is a shame.
Because it's one thing to go into hostile airspace when you have anti-aircraft guns.
It's another thing to go in with not much.
And a civilian-grade vessel, some 20 mils, be bombed repeatedly and still get your ship home.
Basically, yeah. Where were we? Say one thing, it feels nice to come back to Ramblings after being away from it for a while. I feel more full of pep to answer questions. I just feel better overall for my holiday. I mean, I needed a break for 5 years. I'm not even joking, it's the first holiday I've had in 5 years. Did lots of
Right
fishing.
now I'm full of something, but it's certainly not pep.
Did lots of fishing. Caught a pike. Great fun. Brackman asks, what kind of ships would the Germans have built to counter the admirals in the earlier question? There is no appreciable way the Germans alter their building problem. There is no specific German counter to the admirals constructed. The Germans just keep building their current building program because they're at war. There's not... It's very rare that nations involved in a large-scale armed conflict construct new capital ships during the Age of Steam and Steel. Usually, naval construction happens before or after a conflict, not during it. During a conflict, you're looking at things like merchant vessels, patrol craft, smaller combatants being built during wartime to replace losses of those ships that are coming. You're not looking at things like battleships being built. Now, there are exceptions to this rule. For example, the United States of America. But, well, that's the United States of America. Pretty much all wartime construction that we see of capital ships, apart from Imperial Japan, and even then, it's still... most of the plans were laid down for the construction before war broke out. Most of the ships we see built during the war were planned prior to it, or laid down prior to it, and finished during the war. How about post-war? Post-war, there is no Imperial German Navy. It's gone. You have pre-dreadnoughts, and you will like it.
Actually, here's the question. Aside from the American berths in... Fuck, what's that little inland sea they've got? Where Washington DC is. Aside from the shipyards in there, I don't think there's anywhere else really that can build a ship besides the Admirals at that point.
No.
Because you have to remember, Hood was bigger than her slipway.
Significantly so.
Like, Hood was several feet away from being in people's houses.
She actually
Which
was
was on a
over
slipway?
people's houses.
Yes! Let's see. Chesapeake Bay, that's it.
I don't know, to tell you the truth.
I mean, the Lexingtons could be built, but the Americans are the only one that can build something of that size.
The Americans are... With that many fast capital ships coming around, the Lexingtons are not going to be what they were.
Yeah.
You're looking at a Lexington-style vessel, but you're looking at it basically being built as a counter to the Admirals.
What you're going to get is the US Navy going, we want that with 16-inch guns.
Basically, yeah.
And they're going to look at the stats of our Navy and put on it, like Hood's max belt being 12 inches. and go, right, we want these Lexingtons to have a 12-inch belt.
Basically.
I would hate to be a mechanic on that engineering section then.
Oof, good lord. The poor old engineers of that section absolutely would be shot to buggery.
Because the admirals are like, to put this properly, the final evolution of their idea of the battlecruiser or the experience of it. The Americans are going into building Lexingtons with no experience in that starship building.
Hmm.
I don't like to remember how much issues the early battlecruisers had. It damages my idea of raw naval superiority. Also, do you have any Cyberpunk players in the chat here? Yeah, so what do you
Cyberpunk enjoyer?
So, what do you think of Phantom Liberty? And is it worth getting? Because it's half price currently.
What I understand and from what the chat is saying, it's worth it.
Yeah, but that's RPG.
I noticed, yeah.
Can you be racist against yourself?
I don't know. Can you? I never really thought
Tumblr!
about that.
Yeah.
Tumblr, I found a question you found your reason.
You want to try that again?
I found a reason to check Tumblr.
We need reasons to check Tumblr now? Well, to be fair, I've never really been on Tumblr. Or Face, or Discord. Well, not Discord, sorry.
I'm sorry, why do we not talk about the anime because it made you depressed? Why? What aspects of it made you depressed?
Oh, yeah, he's talking about the small girl getting squished by the big cyborg.
Oh, that's rough. Well, I mean, it's someone being crushed on the foot. Yeah, going squish would be very rough.
The Cyberpunk crew got their tomboy GF, and then she got squished.
Oh? Oh, Rebecca!
Yes.
Yeah, may they rest in peace.
Look, we always knew she was gonna die. It's Cyberpunk.
Also, the fact that the
It's
USSR
like-
still exists, but isn't the USSR.
The Forever Winter to me is kind of like Cyberpunk, except for none of the goofiness or the possibility of a happy ending. No, just constant fucking war.
Yeah, Flea,
Think of
remember, the only reason that the USSR exists in the Cyberpunk universe is because it's essentially a vassal state of the fucking European Union.
What? How does that make any fucking sense?
Because the European Union is a massive federalized state that controls all of
Ramblings.
Europe.
Yes, it's a normal ramblings. Please tell me it doesn't include the UK.
No, the UK's gone from monarchy to fascist dictatorship to republic to monarchy to fascist dictatorship again. And we now think it's a republic.
So we we spun the wheel 6 times.
As far as we know.
Can we spin it back
We
to
also
monarchy? Can we spin it back to constitutional monarchy, please? We were doing well with that.
Well, no, because Queen Elizabeth ruled for, I think it's 50 years? No, for like 40 years.
Oh.
As a cybernetic god queen.
Oh.
And then died. Due to
Oh.
mysterious circumstances.
Oh.
Here's one.
I'm sorry. So
And
she
people watch
ruled
Children of
as
Men.
a cybernetic god queen. Whose idea was this?
Cyberpunk.
No. Cease.
don't know about you, but I kind of like that idea.
We are not. This is not that steampunk scenario where they put Queen Victoria on a god support couch. This is not bloody Magna Britannia. I've read that series; it's great, but I do have many questions.
But here's one for the chat, considering it almost got buried. People watched Children of Men. The 2006 film? No one?
Darth Sidious. 1914 Grand Fleet versus 1918 High Seas Fleet. Opinion: the High Seas Fleet is the High Seas Fleet. Well, yeah, yeah. It most likely is the Grand Fleet, but the High Seas Fleet is stupid if it doesn't attempt the fight. It has 15-inch guns. The Grand Fleet does not. It actually has It has more battle cruisers than the Grand Fleet does, since in 1914. A few very big ticket battle cruisers are elsewhere doing other things. The Grand
What do you
Fleet.
mean the story writers were literally on
The
track?
Grand Fleet still has pre-dreadnoughts in it. Honestly, the 1918 High Seas Fleet it's basically a coin flip. It will come down to how the fleets are commanded, basically, as to which fleet wins that fight. But that's about the size of it.
No, we're not skipping over that. What do you mean the story writers were literally on crack? I want to know more about that.
No, Meta, we're skipping over that.
No, we're not skipping over that. I want to know more
Meta,
about
this is my show. I decide what happens.
Alright, cool, but I want to know the answer to this.
I don't care. We're moving
You
on.
don't have to.
Set me off topic. Which do you consider better, the Constitution refit or the Miranda class? Connie refit, obviously. Like, come on, it's the Connie refit. You can't stand there and say the Miranda class is anything close to being the Connie refit. In capability, it's still the Connie refit. The Miranda is basically a frigate analog, patrol ship. The Connie's a cruiser. It's not even close. Do you think the US Abrams tank going with a turbine engine is a correct decision? I think turbine engines are coming in generally.
Yeah, have you looked this up? I can't see anything on it.
Basically down to the fact that the power density they offer, not just in terms of horsepower, but ability to generate electricity, is becoming more and more vital as
Where did you get this
tanks become more and more electronically complex, and we get things like laser, laser not APDS. Sorry. Come on, Foxo Dragon. What's that system where tanks kill incoming projectiles?
APS.
Thank you. Things like laser APS come into service in a big way, but we're seeing them being prototyped right now, and that draws a lot of power. It's basically all about power density, and things like direct drive gas turbines, like we see in the Abrams or the TAT/T-64, are probably not going to be in vogue. But gas turbine electric, aka a constantly running gas turbine that generates electricity that runs the rest of the tank systems, we will likely see.
I know an APFS DS
Evening,
is just
Raptorat.
Spitfire said it first, and then he deleted it. Understandable.
If
Still want
Dosidius
to know
asks,
where you
if
got the
Germany
idea
was
for
allowed to
the
retain
Starlight
2
Pixel
Nassaus
crap.
after World War II instead of the pre-dreadnoughts, how would their refits look like, and would they survive into World War II? Well, yes, they would survive until World War II, because they're not getting anything else to replace them. Because you'd likely have the 2 Nassaus and then the pre-dreadnoughts, and you'd have separate replacement categories for each. So the Nassaus, for example, so you'd have the same 10,000 ton limit to replace the pre-dreads as you had for historically. But to replace the Nassaus, let me see. So I'm just going to have a quick look. I'm just going to very quickly
You mean
check.
it's canonically 100 plus? Is that bananas, mangoes, what?
Have a look. So the Deutschland class battleships were 1,300 tons, and they gave them 10,000 tons for their replacements. And the Nassaus are 18,000 tons. So they'll probably be given 15,000 tons to replace the Nassaus. So what you're looking at, no, the expense required to do that is just not going to work. Also, from a cost perspective, with the Nassaus and the pre-dreadnoughts, their entire fleet's triple expansion. So, and for the Weimar government, naval spending is not on their list of priorities. And they have 20 years to wait for replacement. The only real threat they have to deal with is the Russians. So you're looking at basic fire control fits, some AA being added, maybe increased elevation, but nothing more than that. And then what you're basically looking at when we get to the 30s, you're looking at the Weimar government basically replacing the Nassaus first. With basically good Deutschlands. With an extra 5,000 tons displacement, you can get a Deutschland that's armoured against 8-inch gunfire along its entire length, and capable of 30 knots. Which suddenly turns the Deutschlands from very average heavy cruisers with big guns as their only selling point to actually effective commerce raiders that can actually fight heavy cruisers with a reasonable chance of winning. And then for the replacement, and then for the replacements for the pre-dreadnoughts, you're probably looking at some form of proto-heavy cruiser. So you're looking at a Deutschland-style hull, but using turbines, carrying 8.1-inch guns, probably 8 of them in 4 twins. Basically a German... Basically a slow cruiser. No, you wouldn't have new 11-inch guns. You'd have the old ones. You'd have a Deutschland effect, basically, because the... You might have a new 11-inch gun created, since the... But no, bear in mind, the 11-inch guns on the Deutschlands are new guns, but they are basically just warmed over. But but the Germans basically had to start somewhere. And so they started by warming over and moderately upgrading their 11-inch guns for the Deutschlands, and you'd have the same thing here.
Yeah, not everyone can be the US Navy and get access to the Royal Navy's info.
Yeah, so same thing with the cruisers. Because these cruisers would be designed outside Washington Treaty limits, you're looking at them mounting 8.1-inch guns. The German cruiser caliber. Same thing, probably warmed-over versions of Blucher's guns. In warmed-over versions of Blucher's turrets, probably. But all on the center line. The whole point of these cruisers is to stand against Russian cruisers, since they'll be designed under the Weimar Navy. Like, for the commerce raiding role, you've got these two 15,000-ton Deutschlands. What you're looking to do with the cruisers is basically build them to stand against enemy cruisers, as in actually stand and fight, not run. So you're looking at a 28 to 30 knot design, slightly more heavily armoured, 8.1-inch guns, that sort of thing. Admiral Wellesley T. Collingwood. Had the Germans been able to make 15-inch guns when they were building the Scharnhorst would have launched with 15-inch guns, correct? If so, how would that affect the war? Honestly, not meaningfully. congratulations, the Germans have another pair of 15-inch capital ships. It might change what fights they take, and if they sink more ships. But in terms of meaningful impact on the overall course of the war, none. Honestly.
Because they're still going to run away from Renown. And Renown's just the blocker for them. Getting out and doing shit.
Because remember, the reason that they ran during Weserberung was not because they thought they couldn't take the fight. They had other shit to be doing.
Yeah. A good analogy is Renown was red when fighting the Pokemon protagonist when fighting Giovanni. He doesn't run because he can't beat you. He runs because he's got other shit to do. And not beat up kids. Renown does beat up kids, though.
Really?
Yeah. Why do you think I like her
That's
so
crazy.
much?
Oh, yeah, understandable.
Because who hasn't seen one of their little gobshites and gone, I wish I could punch you, and then actually punch them?
Yeah, should beat up Alt JMS.
Your typical gunner officer asks question: do you think the P-47 could compete against European 1943 aircraft, or is the P-47 the worst Allied single-engine fighter aircraft in 1943? What?
Make me feel better.
The P-47 did compete with European aircraft in 1943. It tangled with Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf 190s. It achieved even kill ratios against them.
No. The issue with the P-47 in Europe is that it's not a Mustang.
Thing is, the Mustang absolutely runs away with the kill ratios. The reason everyone goes, everyone looks at the P-47 and goes, ooh, ground attack aircraft, meh, is because the P-47 was basically achieving even kill ratios. Whereas the Mustang with the Merlin rocks up and goes, hold my beer, and literally just starts cleaning the skies over Central and Western Europe.
Right? And unlike the P-47 at this point, it can go into Germany itself.
Like the P-47s do get drop tanks, but they're basically not escorting the bombers all the way. And also, then the P-47 gets sidelined for the ground attack role. Because
the Mustang!
Yeah, and it frees up the P-47 to do that job. But it's also worth pointing out that P-47 isn't relegated to that role because it's bad. It's relegated to that role because it's good. Good carry weight, strong, resistant to ground fire.
Arguably, the only issue it has is it's still using radial engines at that point.
No, there's nothing wrong with a good radial. It's reliable, tough.
That point, inlines are hitting the stride are just, like you saw in the Mustang, are just going ridiculous power densities for the size.
Oh, true, but we do see radials still basically stick around until the end of the piston-engined era, for good reason. Sometimes you do need that.
Yeah.
Slightly used. Yeah, a bit of spin polish and it'll be good as new. To answer your question, Alt JM SDF time my 1947 guy, Fort Grays, 15 minutes, 11.5 kilometers in the air.
Some guys on the internet said the Focke-Wulf 190 and Bf-109 1943 are better than the P-47. I mean, it depends.
Right, the issue with that is
which Focke-Wulf 190 and which Bf-109 and which P-47, because it depends.
Yeah. The thing is, the ones if you go by the early,
it also depends.
variants,
It also depends on where the engagement's taking place. Is it a low altitude engagement? Is it a mid altitude engagement? Are we up high? Where are we fighting? Oh yeah, these are being streamed.
Oh shit!
It's not even that fleet. It's a case of the 109s and What nice, I've had to go for really big engines because of their pure fuel quality. So when they ended up with high quality fuel, they produced absolute pocket rockets when they got access to 105 octane. But they didn't have access to the 105, which means they needed much bigger engines to do the exact same thing. So, here is it to G's. You'd have to go to someone like Rex for that.
Yeah, we'd have to get Rex in
Because
here to deal with to really
I
hammer
can speak
this.
in generals, but like that's a specific model of aircraft against a specific model of aircraft.
Yeah. Why was Glorious almost undefended when Sharnost and Gneisenau found her in her 2 destroyers? Because she wasn't following RN doctrine. And was being used in a very silly way. Me and Dr. Clark have covered this in previous ramblings. Can't remember exactly which one. But yeah, she shouldn't have been there. That's basically the reason. She was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And Sharnost and Gneisenau weren't where the British thought they were going to be.
I think it's strange. The Scharnhorst and Gneisenau were running around away from the Royal Navy battlecruiser, Renown, and then stumbled across Gneisenau, Search Glorious, because both Scharnhorst and Gneisenau were also heavily out of position and out of Luftwaffe air cover.
It was basically a case of for the Germans it was right place, right time. For the RN it was wrong place, wrong time.
Glorious thought she was operating in friendly waters. It turns out he wasn't.
She was also breaking doctrine by not having at least a cruiser with her. If she'd have had a cruiser with her, that becomes very different.
Not really.
Well, no, the Germans are going to win, but the question is, what's the cost going to be? I mean, because Dr. Clark has said, if you've got a cruiser, you're focusing fire on the cruiser. Like, Glorious may get away.
Glorious ain't getting away. Renown's too far away at that point.
It doesn't matter whether Renown's like, even just like
And Glorious is too show. It's too slow.
What are you talking about? Glorious isn't slow.
She's not slow, she's just... Her design was sluggish as a carrier.
No.
And she's only 28 knots, if I remember correctly.
No, she's 32. What are you talking about?
I might be getting the carriers mixed up.
Yeah, no. All 3 of the Glorious, Courageous, Furious sisters could break 30 knots. All of them.
Generation 0 is like $5 on Steam.
Oh, it's the Eagle that was 28, 26.
No, Eagle and Hermes were... Eagle was 24, Hermes was 26. Courageous, Glorious, Furious can crack 30 knots.
Cool.
All of them.
Yeah. Get them mixed up, but...
And because the thing is...
I don't think even with cruisers...
All the cruiser and destroyers have to do is die well, distract the Germans, and maybe torpedo them to buy time for, and also lay smoke, to buy time for Glorious to go run.
It has like 2 story DLCs and it jack it up to $9.
I mean, possibly, but I just don't see the Royal, even if their county class is slowing down on Hossingen now long enough for Glorious to escape. As far as I'm aware,
hello,
the setup
Phoenix.
for that is...
I didn't realise you'd showed up. Nice to see you.
They've been here for a while. How'd you not notice?
Because I'm an idiot.
You're not
Oh,
an
you
idiot,
didn't
you're
do that.
just... You're just... challenged.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Yeah, he is challenged. Wait, that's pot calling a kettle black. I'm challenged.
I
Meta-
challenged, I'm fucked.
Meta, you're not challenged, you're meta. There is nothing else to describe the way you
Yeah,
are.
I'm challenged.
Get quick scope, nerd.
Yeah.
Eat war crimes.
Foxholes is funnier.
Intellectually blind. I'm not intellectually blind. What's that supposed to mean?
But you disappeared when we were having a 40k conversation a few weeks ago. Very conveniently.
What's that supposed to mean?
You were never there.
That's not. That doesn't make any.
You were never there.
What are you?
We
doing?
had a conversation about like 8
Meta?
hours when you weren't there. Yeah.
Why does that sound like a conversation with a neglectful father? You were never there when I needed you.
Oh, that series repeating itself.
What
really.
would Graf
Me and my
Zeppelin do
father.
if she was used during Operation Vesperung? Her primary.
Die.
Well, yes, but in all seriousness, the best thing she
Oh,
can
that
do
sucks.
is scout. The best thing she can do is scout. Prevent Allied. Also, keep a cordon around the German ships. So prevent Allied reconnaissance aircraft getting bearings on course and speed. She's not really got much recourse to strike. But, again, as I've said before, even just a small cap can break up strikes. And given how small the strike packages against Bismarck were, if it gets to that point, then it's very likely that the BF-109s, or more accurately, Arados, will break up the strike before it really gets close. If they're scouting, they may see the British battlecruisers coming in, and the German ships may break away. There may not even be the Battle of the Denmark Strait. If they, but then again, this assumes the British don't respond. If they know that if they don't catch Graf Zeppelin coming out with them, then the Germans are free to break out into the Atlantic, and from that point, it's too many butterflies. But if they do detect her, Denmark Strait is basically the entire home fleet, including the carrier Victorious, jumping on the Germans. Because at that point, you're bringing everything. If the Germans are sending a carrier, a battleship, and a cruiser, Tovy is not leaving anything behind. The entire home fleet is sailing. We're gonna go get them. We're gonna go stop them. Overkill is what's required.
I know and a repulsor are going to join the fight at least.
Yeah, but after the battle is joined, because again, that's one of the things they did with
The hell? Damn it.
Would HMS Tiger have been a good ship for the Chileans? Yeah. The other Chileans could have found a good use for Tiger. They've got a long coastline, lots to patrol. Yeah, the Chileans could get good use out of Tiger. Question. Thoughts on the USS CVA-58 project? Let me have a look. And let me just have a nosy.
Ah, shit. Blood in my mouth again.
Oh,
I gotta
the USS
go.
United States. She was a terrible, terrible, terrible idea.
She was perfect.
She was a really, really, really bad idea.
Nah, she won.
Do you think if the ship is built, the subsequent Foracle class design would also be built? Yes, because they'll look at the USS United States, go, why did we build this? And go and build the Forestals, which are much, much better. What if the Yamato swap places with Bismarck at Bismarck's last stand? Well, it depends. Is the Yamato as badly damaged as Bismarck? Okay, so Phoenix is, as I said. So if she's as badly damaged, she's still doomed, but yeah, Phoenix is... Phoenix, you want to come up? You can come up if you like, mate. Yeah, sure, I'll bring you up. Hey, Phoenix is here.
Hello, Phoenix.
Yippee. Happy fleet noises.
Uh,
But yeah,
How if my mic was actually activated.
There you go. You're going. But yeah.
No, sorry. I have a hard button on my laptop for that, and I forgot to actually turn it off. I might have to mute myself from time to time, but
Yeah,
I'm
we
around.
know. We get it. We understand. Going undercover. Yamato is doomed, but she is far tougher and not to crack than Bismarck.
Yeah. Oh, especially given the fact that, her main battery is considerably more heavily armored, which was really one of the big things with Bismarck, right? The British were able to silence her relatively early on in the engagement. First 20 minutes, half her battery's out of action, and then, next 45, and within 45 minutes, I think all guns are out of action. I mean, it was a slaughter at that point. Yamato would be a lot harder to quiet in that sense.
Yeah. And all of her guns, unlike Bismarck, which only some of her guns have sighting hoods and fire control, Yamato's guns can fire under local control. If you don't cripple those turrets, they will keep banging away with some degree of accuracy.
Yeah.
The only hope the best thing for the British to do is to try and get torpedoes into her as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and to be honest, that is frankly the best. And granted, they can absorb a lot of them, especially if you're not focusing on one side of the ship, but that is kind of the way to go with Yamato because their torpedo defenses are so bad.
Yeah, you basically want to put holes in one
it's just
side.
There's so much ship to flood.
Yeah, you basically want to put holes in one side and roll her over.
Yeah.
Darth Sidious, do you think there's a chance for Glorious and Graf Zeppelin to engage in 1940? If both exist and are used in Operation, in the Norwegian campaign, it's possible. Don't know how.
The one difficult thing with Graf Zeppelin is always in what form. Because the key thing is they never.
Yeah, if it's 1940, we're looking at a Graf Zeppelin that's in this weird hybrid state. She'll have her cats, but she won't need to use them since she'll likely be operating the Arado biplane fighters she was originally considered for, and not BF-109Ts.
Yeah, and those might work out better because the big thing is they never really got the landing arrangement down. There's actually a really, really interesting article by an Italian historian, Enrico Cercianucci, in Warship 2024, where he's talking about the landing arrangements on Aquila, which are basically they're a slightly improved version of what was on Graf Zeppelin, because the Italians and Germans were working back and forth on this issue. They were both trying to get it to work, and it never really got to work in a form that was satisfactory. The Americans even got to take a look at the Italian version of the system after the war, and were really, really not pleased with what they saw. It looked very unsafe to them. But yeah, they really never really nailed that down. So just the whole principle of, do we have a carrier that works in World War II is really very dubious for either of the two projects, even though, obviously they were built and mostly completed. This is why I always kind of go back to the whole, if you want to talk about European Axis powers having carriers in World War II, they really have carriers in service before the war so they can actually figure out how to properly, build and use them.
It's like I've said, the only way Graf works is if the catapults that she carries aren't required to launch her aircraft, which basically means you have to ditch the Ju-87, you have to ditch the BF-109T, and you have to go with the Arado 68 carrier version and the Fiesler as your only aircraft that can operate from Graf. That's the only way Graf really works. You need aircraft that can use her catapults if they want to, but they must not be required for aircraft to leave the deck, basically.
Yeah. And then, again, landing becomes a whole difficult question to with exactly what you're trying to land with. Because certain aircraft they had nailed, they had figured out mostly, and certain other ones they hadn't, so...
Yeah, the biplanes are fairly easy. Slower landing speed, wider tracked undercarriage. You've got a better chance of bringing the birds back down.
Mm-hmm.
But if that's the case, if we're looking at... Honestly, if Glorious is carrying skewers, that may be a problem. Because the skewers may just be able to go past the Arado biplanes at higher speeds than the Arados can do, and dive bomb Graf Zeppelin, who has no armoured flight deck.
Were the Arado 68s ever meant to be used on Graf Zeppelin then?
There was an Arado. There was a German biplane carrier fighter. I think it was the Arado
I
68.
don't think it's the 68. Because I can't. Because I was just looking.
Sorry, the Arado
I'm
19. Sorry, the Arado 197. Sorry. I think. Yeah, the Arado
designed for Graf
197.
Zeppelin.
Yeah, the Arado 197. Sorry.
I wasn't sure about actual biplane fighters for
Two
it.
7.62mm machine guns and a 20mm. So that's more heavily armed than I was expecting.
It's still
Look, it's
pretty
an
mediocre to say the least.
Oh, it's
I guess,
mediocre.
for Graf Zeppelin.
No, it's mediocre, but the point is the soft factors of what matters here. The ability to take off and land from Graf
Actually
Zeppelin.
take off and land.
Yeah. Also, the range isn't bad. 16,000 kilometers with an auxiliary fuel tank. That's not so bad. So yeah, we're looking at Arado 1. So we're looking at air wing of Arado 197s and Fieseler 167s, which it's not the worst air group,
It's
but it's not
pretty bad. But
it's not a bad air group for the 1940s. For 1940, I should say. Basically, if Glorious and Graf Zeppelin meet, it's gonna come down to the air wings of both sides. Who gets the first spot? Who flies off the first strike? How do the caps on both sides perform? How does early radar play into this? That's what it's gonna come down to. Like any carrier on carrier engagement, it comes down to basically chance and luck. Who spots first? Who launches the first strike? Does the first strike launch find the target on time? How do they do? Both carriers have the capability to kill the other. It comes down to who finds who first. Admiral Wellesley T. Collingwood asks, how would a modern British supercarrier be used? Assuming the ship is above 90,000 tons standard. This is about fleet composition and air groups. The same, well...
I don't think they would necessarily want to...
fleet composition is fairly straightforward. They just take the place a QE takes in a British carrier strike group. That's not hard.
Yeah.
In terms of air group...
Air wing's probably the same.
No.
Bigger.
No, in terms of air group, you're looking at American E2 Hawkeye, you're looking at F-35A, sorry, not F-35A, F-35B, which is the carrier version that's not VTOL.
STOL, yeah.
Yeah, so...
No, it is VTOL. It is the VTOL one.
Which, Phoenix, which is the F-35 version that is not VTOL, but is carrier capable.
That's the C, isn't it?
Charlie.
Yeah,
But
so
I don't think
yeah.
Britain uses those.
Well, no.
I guess then again, if this is a supercarrier, it might not have the ramp.
Yeah, so if it's a supercarrier, it's gonna be Cato bar. So we're looking at F-35.
We hope.
Yeah, so you're probably looking at F-35C, mix of F-35C, F-18, mix of those two airframes. Basically, F-18 being used as a bomb truck / tanker. You're looking at E2 Hawkeye for your airborne early warning. You're probably still looking at Merlin for ASW work. That's basically it.
Would we use the E2 on it?
Pardon?
I know the Americans do. I know the Americans use the E2, but I'm just wondering if we would actually have it,
What?
even on a supercarrier scale vessel.
What alternative is there for carrier-borne early warning?
That's my whole point. I'm not sure we would use one.
Why not?
Hello.
Why wouldn't
Well,
we, Dragon? Dragon, why
right.
wouldn't
Well,
we?
But quite
Okay,
because
just-
basically since the Falklands we haven't. Even during the Falklands we didn't.
Quick thing.
Go on.
Never underestimate BAE, a contract, and when they have a reliable airframe called the Nimrod.
The Nimrod is too big.
There were plans for one with folding wings.
You cannot put a
There
Nimrod on a
was,
carrier. I
but-
don't care.
You probably could.
No, you
The question is-
cannot.
right. No, you probably can. No. Fleet. It's not a problem of can you, because you can.
It's should
It's a problem
you.
of should you. And the answer is no.
Well, no, you can't anyway because it's too big. The landing profile's all wrong.
Look, all I'm going to say is they said the same thing about B-25s of Hornet,
Yeah,
and
but
a
that's-
mad lad
yes,
fucking did it.
Yes,
Admit,
but
they
the
didn't
difference-
land though, admittedly.
The one-way trip.
Yeah, like
But
that's the
I do
difference.
think on a large scale supercar, it is potentially.
No, Dragon.
Let's
The
emphasize
Nimrod is too big.
potential.
The Nimrod's wingspan is far too big. It's based off the Comet airliner. That thing is
I know.
farcically too large to fit on a carrier. It'd be like trying
So
to
There
land a
was
7.
My thoughts.
Oh, God.
So one thing I will note is 90,000 tons does not necessarily mean you are actually looking at the kilo bar option. If you're
Yeah.
looking at the QE class's development, right? So there was multiple versions of the same basic layout. Hang on, I gotta mute myself. Of course, as soon as I start talking, this is brilliant.
Okay, I'll just
Yeah.
wait for him to come back. So, but very quickly,
I do agree with him.
he has a point there.
It's one I do think. I still think we might, even on a supercar. I still think they might use the ramp.
Well, we'll have to see what Phoenix says. But I personally think if we are talking British supercarrier, rather than carrier, then I would go with, well, supercarriers have catabar. I can't think of a single supercarrier that doesn't have a catabar arrangement.
Keyword considered there, Collingwood. And that was mostly disagree because the sheer expense of refitting it into catabar.
And it's not really a point.
Hmm.
But going back to the previous point, though, I would like Britain to use, say, the E2 fleet. I think it would make sense, or some sort of airborne early
I'm
warning.
back.
As Cyclic and Dr. Clark and others have said, the thing is with the ET, you basically take advantage. Like, yeah, let BAE draw up a design for a British replacement, but the E2's there, it's ready now, and the cost to acquire is less. Like, let BAE
That's what I'm wondering.
like let
Is there
BAE
any
work
current
up a
ones in
replacement.
service?
Like let BAE work up a replacement for it. Heck, they could even bid to replace the E2 while they're doing it. But on US carriers. But here's the thing: the E2 is there now. It's a proven
As I said-
design. We know it works.
It's just the thing I'm concerned. Like, does Britain currently have an airborne early warning for the carriers?
We basically have the same thing that we did. British airborne only warning for carriers since the retirement of our Catobar carriers has always been either a Merlin or a Sea King with radar.
That's why I'm wondering. Since that's basically what we know, I'm wondering if we would potentially stick with that.
No, it's worse in
If it's a
every
kilo bar,
conceivable-
you're almost certainly going to be buying E2s, but the question is if it would be a kilo bar. So what I would generally say is, so kilo bar is like a whole of force decision, because when you're talking about your British F-35 program, right, you're talking about a concern that's not just the Royal Navy, but also the Royal Air Force, and the idea of, like, do we have a common fleet or not, right? Or whether we split between variants, how much money is actually going in, not just for the carriers, but also for the F-35 program itself. And of course I have to mute myself immediately as soon as I start talking. This is give me one.
Hello, Patch.
But yeah, it's but basically, if we're if it's not a Catabar carrier, if it's not a Catabar carrier, it's just more of the same. Basically, it's just a QE but with more aircraft.
Kind of.
But
So QE is the second largest version of herself. essentially. When they were deciding on the jump jet version, they had basically 4 versions: Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta. Huey is Delta. Oh my god, I have to do myself again. I'm really sorry. This is just.
Fine.
I'm sorry.
I had like 30 minutes.
This is
of
more
DC
comical
now.
at this
happening.
point, so don't worry.
Yeah, this just happens. We understand. We get it.
And the wealth of knowledge is worth it anyway.
DDV 185.
I feel that's cheating, calling it a DDV.
Okay, let's try this again. All right, yes. So QE is specifically Delta, which is 65,000 tons empty, 20 meters, 80 meters long, designed with 36 F-35Bs to 108 sorties in a 24-hour period, then sustained sorties of about 72 per day. The largest version of that design, though, is a design known as Alpha, which is 73,000 tons empty, which is probably going to get you up to about 90,000 tons, because remember, QE herself is about 65,000 tons empty, and her loaded displacement is estimated to be about 75,000 tons. And this thing is overall larger. It actually has about 3,000 tons of armor on it, versus, Delta's design's unknown amount of armor. And it is designed for top-rate 40 fixed-wing aircraft and have a surge of 150 sorties per day, which is significantly more. So we're talking about a larger, slightly better arranged, and certainly more durable QE. There was also supposed to be VLS for slider VLS for Aster missiles, which so this is definitely enhancing most of all just self-defense capabilities. Like this thing had like Samson and everything. Was just too damn expensive, so the Royal Navy couldn't procure it. But I would generally say if you're talking about a 90,000 ton QE, that is kind of the easiest thing to point to as far as what you would get out of it. Because again, if you're talking about whether the decision to go Kato Bar or not is just a whole of force decision that takes into account a lot more than just the Royal Navy's concerns. And I'd also say in general, in terms of picking aircraft out, either way, you're going to take a very long time to build up to the force you want, right? Because obviously, as we see now with the Royal Navy, their ability to send F-35Bs aboard carriers is entirely dependent on the training pipeline and the rate they get delivered F-35s. The same thing is really going to hold for a Kato Bar version too. They have to wait for the rate of F-35C production, which granted would be larger because the Royal Navy would be adding a ton of F-35C orders to the existing U.S. Marine Corps and U.S. Navy orders, because they're the only other users of F-35C, or the only users at present, I should say. I don't know if you'd get intermediate aircraft like the F-18 though, just because this is be adding another aircraft to the Royal Navy, to the Royal Air Force and Royal Navy's inventory, and that is going to compete in terms of Royal Air Force with the Eurofighter. In terms of again, it's going to compete with F-35 as well in terms of funds. And British F-35, even though Britain has a very large role in the F-35 program, I know an F-35 engineer that I have in the program who basically says the F-35B it's called Bravo, but we could also call it the F-35 British because of how large their involvement in that platform was. But even then, even with all that, it is still a procurement that is absolutely squeezed between two things, which is Typhoon and Tempest, which are the real big deals in terms of where the money goes for aircraft in Britain, because they're big RAF projects and they involve much more of UK industry. The UK has a much bigger role in them. So that's kind of the issue. Like I don't know if you'd even get an interim aircraft for a Kato Bar QE versus just we'll slowly get there with F-35C.
I don't think you would see carrier-capable Typhoons, Collingwood.
No, it's too much of a risk. And to be blunt, it's too complex.
I don't think it's too much of a risk. I think it's just too awkward.
Yeah, you do it to Tornado.
No!
Oh god, the return of Tornado.
You need to... we get some really cursed timeline where the British and the French go off and walk off and do their own thing, and Typhoon and then the Eurofighter ends up being this weird split between the Germans, the Italians, and the Spanish.
So you're telling me
the most cursed timeline I could possibly think about.
Oh no, you've given me an even worse idea.
But this is actually a point of commonality, though, because one of the big things with Rafale was, again, the French wanted a carrier version of the aircraft, and nobody else in the project wanted that. So there is technically that point you could argue along, even though I don't think it would work out because Dassault would still want, or Dassault would still want far too much of a share, industrial share, relative to order numbers for the British to be okay with it. But your typical gunnery officer, as long as the QEs are conventionally powered, they're going to have 2 islands. It really is very much down to both redundancy and survivability, but also just trunking arrangements. While you have 2 gas turbine groups, it's just your alternative to how what the QEs have is what Cavor currently has, where you have a whole bunch of island between the 2 major parts of the island that are actually around the the uptakes for the gas turbines. Which does give you more space to work with, but it also kills a lot of parking space on deck, and it's generally better to have the space on deck. Like if you compare, like for example, Trieste, for example, is not too dissimilar to Cavor in size, but has the same 2 island configuration as the QE, and her flight deck arrangement is vastly superior to Cavor's, considerably larger area to work with, better arrangement of the elevators. I mean, the lifts. It's just a much better arrangement to go with. Because you really can't go with like a small single island the way the French and the Americans do unless you're a nuclear-powered carrier.
Clearly just need a return of the Queen's Anne's mansion. This time, instead of just one thing, just put the entire block of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's hard to do with a carrier because you don't want to put a carrier's island in the middle of a carrier unless you're trying to pull a Furious. Or was it Courageous? Or was it both of them? I forget. But technically speaking, you can have a conventionally powered carrier that has only 1 island if you trunk all the exhaust up through it. The problem is, either you're taking up a ton of space within the ship for all this trunking of the exhausts, or you're cramming your gas turbines all together in the same location, thus making it possible for a single hit to just entirely cripple the ship, which is generally not something you want to go for.
That sounds like things would end badly.
Yeah, I mean,
one hit taking the whole ship out is.
Yeah, I feel like there's some historical cases of mobility kills from a single hit, and like lessons that we don't want to repeat this. Trick Royal.
Yeah.
Oh, so the Delta version of QE we got was actually not the smallest.
Yeah, as Phoenix said earlier, it's the second largest.
Wow.
Why?
It's surprising that the British actually didn't wimp out and go small.
I think it's basically the Navy said, yeah, no.
Oh yeah, the Navy absolutely. The Navy had experienced the Illustrious and the Type 42s for that matter. And basically a lot of the because during the Cold War, right, the Treasury's constant demand for smaller, cheaper designs, and the Royal Navy saying, okay, smaller is cheaper, basically always drove them to just find the smallest possible way to cram everything they needed aboard ships. And they very much discovered in operations that this was not ideal. Type 42s obviously battle damage concerns, and the Falklands was an obvious lesson, but even the Illustrious with their narrow hangars, everything was just bad about this. So they quite rationally approached the question of ship design afterward, and they're like, hey, I mean, steel is not free, and nor is volume, but like steel is relatively cheap and air is relatively free. And if you're looking at a carrier capability, especially, capability scales with size, scales with volume in a way that it does not with regular surface combines. It's a much greater coefficient. So, if you increase a carrier by like say, a 50,000 ton design gets increased to 10,000 tons, and you might increase cost by only about a fifth, but you will, or maybe a quarter, but you'll increase the aviation capability by 50%. That's a pretty damn good deal. And the Royal Navy was very much focusing on this when it came to the Queen Elizabeth. They wanted a larger designs that have better handling spaces, more room for growth down the line, better ability to take larger aircraft. And because they realized that they would save very little by cutting the size down, but they would lose a lot of capability. And the QEs, I think, really did turn out very well in that regard. Relative to their cost, the aviation capability that they have is quite decent. It's just, they obviously not being K-bar design, they are limited in terms of support aircraft, and just because of the general course of the F-35 program, they just don't have a lot of aircraft to play with at present. They may never have like the overload capacities they were looking at, but relatively speaking, especially if you look at what the cost would have been without like a mandatory enforced like year or two of delay to save money in the short term that made them cost like £1 billion extra in the long term, they're pretty good capability for their cost, and you really wouldn't have saved much, but you would have lost a lot if they had gone for something smaller and cheaper. Like, they're not flawless ships by any means, but I think sometimes they get more shit than they deserve, especially on the cost front and the whole size debate.
Fair enough.
Like, in a perfect world, you'd love to see them like KOR, have all the bells and whistles, but
yeah, but there comes a point where we have to be realistic. Where were we? Do you think the QEs will still end up with 2 islands instead of 1? Yeah, the RM was basically sticking with that concept. Katabar or not, they were sticking with that 2 island design. Since Guy is here, yippee! That means that means we get to do Dutch questions, specifically Admiral Wellesley Collingwood, design 1047 carrier conversion, and more importantly, and more interestingly for me, what aircraft would the Dutch have operated from such a carrier had they completed it? Like, let's say for example, let me hypothetically pad out a timeline here just so we can get decent things without butterflies. Let's say that the Germans let's say that Hitler does, World War I, II. He doesn't invade the Netherlands. And the Dutch are there building the 1047s. And they get the hull for 1 done, since, the guns aren't coming, and they decide, you know what, we'll convert it into a carrier. You're looking at a carrier of around 40,000 tons, roughly, once conversions are all said and done. Guy, did the Dutch have any dual-purpose guns they can use for a carrier? Does the Dutch fleet operate any dual-purpose guns at this point?
Not at that point in time, but they were looking to use 12cm / 5-inch Bofors guns and then just give them very high elevation.
So would that likely be the armament for the carrier?
Probably.
And then, of course, since they're the Dutch, 40mm everywhere.
And I wouldn't say everywhere, but a good deal of 40mm Bofors guns.
Let's see, think about it. Assuming entry into service 1940... late 41.
That's way too quick for those things to be ready.
Oh no, because the Dutch aren't at war. So, let me think.
No, even peacetime estimates were that at the time there was still about the battlecruisers themselves. They estimated okay, if we're going to build this at a reasonable rate, they'll be ready in 1944.
Okay, and assuming
which would have been too late anyway.
And assuming that we're stopping doing a design for a carrier and then restarting production on one of them, because obviously you're not going to get the 11-inch guns from Germany at this point because they're at war. So, yeah, 44 probably still. And that means the Dutch have got to come up with carrier aircraft. Mid-sized carrier. It's a mid-sized carrier.
There was a very popular solution around this point in time of just, going to the Americans with some cash and buying 4Fs off of them and just renaming them. The French did it, for example.
The Dutch.
I'm being entirely serious. The French did this, for example, when they realized that they weren't going to be able to get any of their domestic fighters into a carrier format anytime soon, or just the demands of the Air Force would take up too much of the factory capacity. Like the Duotane D790 was the original planned fighter. The final French planned fighter for the Joffre class. and then they just said, you know what, we're not going to get these in time, so we're just going to go to the Americans, buy some F4Fs, and those, I think the French started calling them the G3As, I think, and they were rearmed with French 7.5s, and then they didn't get to France because of the fall of France, so the British took them and converted them into martlets. And funny story, actually, it's a funny connection here. So they had their tail hooks initially. Some of them had them pulled out when they were used on land. And one of them that went down in North Africa was captured, the wreck was captured by the Italians, who took it, and one of their designers was looking at the space where the tail hook was installed but not actually present. He was able to kind of reverse engineer what the hell the tail hook would look like, and then designed it, built it, and they trialed it. They said, wow, this is actually better than what we were going to use on Aquila with the German resting gear, and they shared it with the German, their new standard of a resting hook for these carrier projects. Granted, this was now like way too late in the war for these ships to be completed, but just a funny connection given what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah. Honestly, I think the biplane... No, it wouldn't be a biplane at all. It'd be some variation on the Fokker 21. For the fighter.
Unlikely.
Oh, okay.
Unlikely.
Go on then, Guy. You have the
Well,
floor.
that might then be... Like, I can imagine that would be... maybe like seen as a stopgap idea, but Fokker was at the time also working on the D-23, which
Let me have a look.
absolutely cracked aircraft. Was a single pilot fighter aircraft with a twin boom tail. There's a twin boom
Oh, that
tail for a
thing!
fighter
Wait, I'm
aircraft.
sorry.
That thing.
You're not sitting here and telling
Wait.
me that twin, the Fokker D-23 would
I
be
had
the
not
carrier
seen that.
aircraft
I love
of
it.
choice.
It might be. I can imagine that
Holy
would be
haze.
one of the vehicles that might be one
I
of the planes that
just-
might be considered. Since
Honestly-
well, that must be said, the D-21 would have been, by the time that it would then have entered service, the aircraft carrier, that plane would then have been like 9 or 10 years old. At that point in time, it wouldn't have already have been like outdated then. So while it might be considered a possible stopgap, it likely
Aren't
would,
all
it would
these
likely have gone for a
land-based,
new
though?
ones.
What was the stall speed?
Let me have a look. Find it. I don't know if there's any information on the.
I'd be concerned about trying to, like, it's one thing to take off, but to land this thing on a carrier, I'd be a little bit concerned. Not
Yeah.
gonna lie.
Because I'm just
Like, it
actually-
also wouldn't surprise me if they would just ask Fokker to design a purpose-built carrier aircraft.
I mean,
I'm just
carrier.
wondering-
Carrier.
I think it's
might
the
be-
best approach if
carrier
you
Since
think about it.
fighter.
we had no experience
say-
with carriers.
I mean,
Is it
purpose-built
possible they
carrier
might just buy
fighter.
British?
No, I mean purpose-built carrier fighter. I could see the Dutch going in on, but for everything else, honestly, I think Phoenix is correct. They go to the Americans and buy TBD Devastator and Dauntless for dive and torpedo bombers. Honestly, like the fighter, they might develop themselves, but
Let's just use the buffaloes.
honestly,
Hon-
oh god, they would. The Dutch bought buffaloes anyway. Oh god, they would as well. Oh fuck. So we've
I can
got
actually see
a
them buying
Dutch.
various British ones, honestly.
So we've
Considering
got a
Britain does
Dutch.
have them at the time.
I mean, again, the Americans were selling F4Fs at the time to the French, so I don't think, as long as you're coming to them with cash, I can't see why they couldn't also just go for those.
Yeah,
Basically,
I mean, the
when
French
is that-
order
when
was
exactly
it
are you
was
buying these?
F4Fs and it was the V165Fs Vindicators as dive bombers, which did fight in the Battle of France.
yeah, it makes sense. One thing I will say is it's definitely gonna change how the Dutch respond to war in the Far, because war in the Far East is still coming, and it is gonna change how the Dutch respond. And also the Dutch are gonna have to play it carefully, because if the Dutch have to basically play very, very fast and very, very loose, because it's not like World War One, where France still exists. No, there is just the Netherlands, and there are Germans on each side, and Japan is Germany's friend. So how did the Dutch enter the war?
Like we did historically, underprepared and underarmed.
Except this time in like 1942. Except it's now
now in 1942.
Yeah, except now
and
it's
we're probably also going to now still get invaded by the Germans. Not so
Yeah.
much because it is an opportunity
The
time
Germans,
to do so, which it would be.
Oh my
However,
god.
the Germans would try to invade the Netherlands,
Oh,
then
no.
to try and get the Japanese to join the war against the Soviets.
Oh no. Yeah, that's right. And then I know it gets worse because it's 1942. The Germans are gonna nick off with 2 1047s and 1 1047 carrier conversion. No. Damn
They're
it.
not gonna nick off of it because they
I
wouldn't
think-
have been ready yet.
Yeah, and I think the Royal Air Force is going to come visiting with lots of heavy bombers.
No, I mean the hulls.
Yeah.
They'll nick off with the hulls. They aren't finished yet, but they'll nick off with the hulls,
Oh yeah,
Alright.
which could be a problem.
they'll just
Ah,
build
yes.
them on the
I
spot.
still think you have. I still
Yeah.
think you end up having heavy bombers move in again.
Hello.
After you try and run off with them.
It will be the final revenge for the raid on the Medway. But the RAF just goes, fuck your shipbuilding, and bombs it all.
The RAF is here to revenge the Medway. I fucking can't. I actually cannot.
RAF doing a Tarente raid
Hey.
all over again.
Hashtag your cruisers are now forfeit. Cease your existence. Fucking. Oh.
Bing
What would
bong,
also
you're
be correct in
wrong.
this case is, since we now have more time, that we might not be better prepared to take on the German assault wave. So that the Germans might not actually get bogged down, since a lot of troops would still be
Oh
committed
no,
to
you're not
the
saying what I
Soviet
think
front.
you're saying. Are you?
I mean,
We're
yeah,
not
but-
gonna get. We're not gonna get the Normandy landings.
Oh my god, the Netherlands
Everyone's gonna
landing.
stream it to no. Everyone is going to stream it to Holland.
I mean, you guys have the ports are well, actually Antwerp is not too far away. I mean,
And the funny
they can work
thing is-
something out. I mean, the port capacity right there is just going to be insane.
Oh, but it gets better because the Germans can't pull that we're going to bomb your capital, you need to surrender, because Fokker 23 squadrons will be on strength by this point, so the Dutch will go, try us, bitch! It gets funny.
The problem is,
It's really a case of like, where do the Germans spare the aircraft from, right?
Yeah.
Because
Where did they get the
you're gonna
aircraft?
have the strategic bombing raids are already going to be happening from the Americans and the British. You already have the Eastern Front is just already a thing, no? And then there's still the Mediterranean Front. It's consuming both German and Italian aircraft. So, like, where are they going to spare the aircraft? I mean, it's kind of thing. It's like a question of, is the nut even worth trying to crack for them? If it's that formidable, which I think in a lot of the case it might not be the case. I mean, frankly, the Germans might even have an argument for having the Dutch as a neutral country be even more useful for them, because so long as the Dutch are neutral, they can still try and import stuff through them. It's hard for them to get otherwise. Granted, I'm sure the British will be leaning very hard on the Dutch for them not to do so, but the British will have a lot less leverage over the Dutch than say they had over the Spanish, just because of the position the Dutch are in, where we share land borders with the Germans, and that's a very compelling argument to not piss off the Germans and not embargo them, even if we very, very much would like to. And also, I'm not really sure what the Dutch oil dependency is like. Because I mean, with Spain, the British had a very easy time with Spain. They literally just calculated how much oil the Spanish economy needed per month to get by, and then cut off the Spanish from all oil imports, almost ground their economy entirely to a halt, and then restarted it at about a level about 10% below what they had calculated. So they would guarantee the Spanish would never have enough oil and could never re-export oil to the rest of the Axis, and basically said, our feet are we have a boot over your neck. Do not step out of line, or you will be so screwed. And the Spanish it was a very compelling reason for the Spanish to never enter World War II on the side of the Axis.
It was one of
alongside Canarius basically saying, like, I know I work for I'm the head of German intelligence, but like I'm saying, do not get involved in our war.
Yeah, like I mean, there's a whole thing where Franco just looks at the Axis powers and goes, "You're telling me that you've declared war on the British, the Americans, and the Russians, and you want me to join this suicide compact?"
Yeah, I mean that's partly why he sent the massive bill to the Germans in terms of supplies that would be needed, knowing full well the Germans could never fulfill it because the whole point was to tell them to politely fuck off.
Yeah,
pardon my
basically,
French.
yeah.
Sane, perhaps not. I mean, he certainly knew how to work for himself better than the rest of them did.
Yeah, and also he knew how to actually, do diplomacy with the other powers rather than just bombastically demanding shit all the time.
Well, granted, I'm not super well read on Franco, but as I understand it, he did not have the same like pathologic hatred of certain groups as, say, Hitler and Mussolini did.
Yeah,
where they were, had just blatant phobias and the like. I mean,
there was some anti-Semitism in Francoist Spain, but
their anti-Semitism was almost everywhere, but
it wasn't
almost no escaping it. But
yeah, but it wasn't that we're rounding you up and shoving you into camps anti-Semitism. It was we don't like you because you're Jewish anti-Semitism, which is still bad, but it's not the same level of anti-Semitism.
I always kind of, it's a hard line to tread because, in a lot of parts of Europe, that anti-Semitism became the we'll round them up and send them to German camps for the Germans anti-Semitism, because that happened in a lot of countries.
Spain was one
France
of
is
the
obviously
ones
the most famous example, but Poland did that as well. There's a lot of the occupied countries did that.
Yeah.
Really, the only exception was while they were unoccupied, the Italians, and that was partly just despite the Germans.
It's quite funny that.
But and that obviously went out the window once the Northern Italy was occupied under the RSI. But yeah, because Mussolini and Hitler both just hated the French to an irrational degree, and then also really did not like the British. I mean, Hitler a lot less so with the British because he was still willing to work with them, and he saw them as being one of the few Germanic races that racially they could possibly work with. But up until the point when the British kind of were very firmly no, that's not happening. In which case, that kind of did turn more into a hate. But
yeah,
gotta love early European racial politics in this era, where it's just it's part of their
just
politics.
fucked. It's just fucked.
So
that's literally it. It's
it
just
absolutely,
fucked.
Yeah.
That's it.
Makes your skin crawl when you read about a lot of it.
Oh, it really does. It really does. We were fucked. Genuinely.
The world is a fuck.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, makes you appreciate that we're in a much better, if not perfect, world now. I mean.
Yeah.
Anywho,
I have a lot of people who talk about French, Spanish alt history MacGuffins and say why didn't Spain build up a navy again? Why didn't Spain do X? You are aware just how destructive the Spanish Civil War was. It was not fun.
Oh yeah, no, I mean they were economically ruined. It took a long time to rebuild. I mean, yeah, and they really in Spain, to be honest, Spain as a country, just economically speaking, was just not well positioned to be a naval power in the industrial era because they never properly industrialized. And this just goes back to earlier issues with their economic structure.
Yeah.
Since the unification into Spain in the first place at the end of the 15th century.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just development from then. Really, so again, the way I will always phrase it is there wasn't so much the Spanish kingdom so much as there was a Habsburg kingdom that ruled over Spain as one of its major provinces, and then after that the Bourbons. But Spain itself is never really properly developed in the same way that, say, the economies in a lot of other European countries did, where they were able to more easily industrialize because they had a market to industrialize. And in manufacturing to industrialize.
From what I've heard, that the internal structure of Spain until the Spanish Civil War was more analogous to 5 kingdoms in a trench coat, with their own separate regional laws and customs instead of an actual unified state.
To a degree, I have to admit I'm less familiar with the specifics of their the political structures of a lot of the regions, but just in general, there was a strong regionalism because Spain is very mountainous internally with very few navigable rivers. So most of the shipping, the most efficient way to travel around Spain for most of Spain's history is to get on a boat and sail around Spain, rather than going directly through Spain. There was not much promotion of internal lines of communication, which also meant that, there was not a lot of movement of, say, crops and materials into places to be manufactured. In a lot of cases, it was just ship it out, send it overseas to usually Italy or the Netherlands or Belgium to have it, manufacture the textiles, whatever goods you had, mainly wool. I mean, Spain for a long time had very good wool that they would export, and then they would buy it back as a finished product, and this would be the case with almost everything they produced. And even with the cash crops and the like. So they never really had a manufacturing capability internally because it just never made sense because it was just more efficient to just export it out. And no one who ruled over Spain for most of Spain's history had the incentive to do so because they didn't really care about building up Spain. They just wanted to tax the people that were working, the subsistence farmer and peasants. And Spain had a very heavy tax burden relative to the rest of the Habsburg Empire. They just wanted to tax them, and they would, why would I bother building up manufacturing capacity in Spain when I have manufacturing capacity in my territories in the Netherlands or Austria or Italy? And why would I care about having a financial network in Spain when I can just go to the banking families in Italy and have all my financials go through them? And this really did reduce the development or slow the development of Spain itself.
Yeah,
as an economy.
You basically see the result of this when Spain finally becomes an independent polity towards the end of the basically when we see Spain breaking off from the Greater Habsburg domains. Basically, when you see the split between Austria and Spain as not parts ruled by as not parts of the Habsburg domain, but 2 separate countries. And then the Spanish monarchs are looking at Spain and going, we're literally kept afloat by our empire. Fuck.
Yep. Oh yeah. And if there was a whole season of reason. There's a reason. There's a whole bunch of reforms by the Bourbons when they take over, trying to see if they could fix or keep the empire afloat and Spain afloat. That really just all comes, and they had some successes, but that really just all comes tumbling down once the Napoleonic War starts because then Spain is invaded, and they just lose they'd lose everything after that point. Really,
yeah,
it's a huge setback.
Yeah, the Napoleonic Wars basically buggers up Spain. They actually tried to take back their colonial possessions by force during the 19th century, with ironclads, and they get their ass handed to them.
Yeah. No, it was nasty. So they took a long time for them to redevelop themselves. Hang on, might even have some good figures for this. To the spreadsheets, Batman.
Can I get that on a t-shirt? To the spreadsheets, Batman. Oh.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a rough. This is based off of his total industrial potential, which is basically a system. It's from an economic paper that basically where the guy was trying to trace development from the mid 18th century onwards, and it's standardized where 100 is equivalent to the UK's total industrial potential in 1900. Right.
Right.
So Spain in 1750 is at 1.6. Right. Which is
that's bad.
Slightly less than which is where Britain is at 2.4. This is 1750, so this is all relative. But Italy is at 3.1, for example. Austro-Hungarian Empire is at 3.7. Fast forward to 1800, and Spain has barely grown to 2.1. Whereas, if you look at Britain has now tripled its industrial capacity in those 50 years to about 6.2. Well, not quite tripled, more like 2.5. The United States, which is now independent, is at 1.1. Give it a reference. So fast forward to, let's say, 1860, which is right before the American Civil War. So we'll do 1830 because that's now after the entire cycle of Napoleonic Wars. Sorry, 1830. Sorry.
Yeah.
I swear I can read the numbers I'm looking at. So Spain is 2.7, barely developed any further. Britain is now at 17.5. The United States has passed out Spain at 4.6. This is again 1830s. And let's see, where's France? Well, France had already been well ahead, but it's at 9.5. 1860s, Spain is only at 4.0. Britain is now at 45. The United States is 16.2. But like fast forward to say like 1913, the start of World War I, where Spain is now at 11, and Britain is now at 127. And that's not including the Empire, mind you. Like Canada and Australia are counted separately. Canada and Australia to combined have that almost as much total industrial. Actually, they have as much total industrial potential as Spain itself in this period. Japan has double the industrial potential. So does Italy. It's
genuinely
just,
like Spain suffers. Basically, Spain suffers.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's basically the entire 19th
was
century.
Brutal.
The entire 19th century was just Spain suffers.
Oh yeah, but then it actually gets damage of the Spanish Civil War. It actually that's how bad it was. 1928 they measure at 16. 1938 they go down to 14.
Ooh.
Like they actually drop. So their total industrial potential is then at that point only barely better than the much smaller Netherlands. It's worse than Belgium. It is about it's what is it? It's half of that of Czechoslovakia. It's equal to Australia, which is still a colony at this point, or no, Dominion. Sorry. It is just not pretty at all.
It doesn't look it.
But the Spanish Civil War absolutely wrecked Spain, and Spain was just not in a great position to begin with. They do not actually reach the total the equivalent of in terms of total industrial potential of what the UK was in 1900 until some point in the early 1970s. It looks like. I have a figure I only have figures for 63 and 73, but yeah.
I mean, the funny thing is that Franco basically said, you know what, no bullshitting around, let's actually fix the Spanish economy and make it function, which he did. And then basically as he was dying, he says, I think I've done enough. Hey, here, dude, the former son of the monarch, yeah. Here's what I want you to do. You restore the monarchy, and then do what you want. You want to be fascism, do fascism. You want to do democracy, do democracy. Just restore the monarchy before you do that, alright? Alright, good. I'm going now. And then he died. And then Juan Carlos restored the monarchy. And implemented a democracy. And gave up most of his power to the democratic government. Leading to the modern Spanish monarchy we know and love today. Which is why Spain has the base Spanish flag and not the shit one. Any questions? Anyone else in the panel have questions about things?
Not really.
Sorry, I had to mute myself. I just got back.
We all know the best flag for Spain is all the flags of the subsequent kingdoms, like Aragon, Leon, Castile, Andalusia, Galicia, cool flag, Catalonia, Navarra, Basque counties.
Damn, I love the flag of Aragorn.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but this question is funny. Your typical gunnery officer asks, what if the scenario was the Falklands War, but the belligerent forces are Argentina versus the USA? Argentine forces are the same during 82 Falklands, but US's forces are the ones in the 1983 Grenada invasion. Do you think the US would sustain heavier losses and casualties than the British IRL? And do you think the US would conduct their own long-range bombing mission like the Black Buck raid? To answer the simple part, no, there's no need for a long-range bombing mission. And the US is absolutely going to wipe the floor with the Argentinians and probably suffer no shipping losses at all.
I will say the biggest issue will be that Texas will be very infuriated that they're going to have to compete with beef sales because the Argentines, once they're another state of the United States, they do export a lot of beef. They have very good beef.
It's not
after
even.
their annexation, of course.
Yeah, it is not even funny. The US.
Well, I mean, here's.
The US will quite.
Oh yeah, God, the Independence Carrier Battle Group was sent to do it for Grenada. Yeah, the Argentines are just turbo fucked. Pardon my French. Yeah, they just. Because again, if you look at the Royal Navy and their issue with fighting around the Falklands, why they had difficulties is just because, the aircraft they were working with and support aircraft specifically in terms of just lack of early warning aircraft. I mean, you send an Independence Carrier Battle Group down there, it can just go and it will be doing offensive attacks against Argentine airfields because they have the ability to dominate Argentine airspace. It's just not even close.
And then there's also the whole even if I give throw the Argentinians a bone and say, yeah, go on, do attacks in San Carlos water, with the US having let you through, US ships with automatic 3-inch guns and automatic 5-inch guns with radar fire control go burr. I'm sorry, but please come down low over San Carlos water. Our anti-aircraft guns want to eat.
Yeah. Well, I mean, exactly. I mean, the whole thing is you wouldn't even have to worry about that with the carrier.
Oh no, exactly.
In the first place,
but I'm just saying, even if I throw them a bone, they're still fucked.
Yeah.
Isn't this still the period of the Hangar Queen F-14 though?
Out
of curiosity.
82? I don't know actually.
Because I remember early in its life, the F-14 had ridiculously low ready rates.
Even if the F-14s aren't available, we've got F-4, we've got Crusader, we've got the US has options.
Introduced in 74, so it's been in service for a hot minute at this point.
I think 82 is actually. Let me just check. I'll just have a look.
Somebody ping Cyclic and see if he explodes or not.
I am not pinging Cyclic. Let me have a look. Where are we? Operational history. F-14A hangar. Let me see. Operational history. F-14 replacing F-4 Phantom 74. Tops. Let me see. No, I want variants. F-14A. So F-14A is the
You
Hangar
should be
Queen.
having F-14As.
Yeah, F-14A is the Hangar Queen version. Because the B,
as far as I can tell, I mean,
yeah, it is. It will be A's. Sadly, B's are basically basically B is when B and D is when the Tomcat starts to cook. I mean,
but they still have other
so the demand is a little bit less.
But I will point out the Tomcat doesn't need to be a high-performance aircraft. It needs to get up high and lob a missile at something, which it can do in the Falklands quite easily.
But that's not the combat situation of the Falklands, as the Argentinians learnt the hard way. It's high stress, low altitude.
Well, it is when you're fighting the British. They're not fighting the British anymore. They're fighting the Americans, who will conduct the campaign completely differently.
Yeah. So this time instead, you've got the Mirage in the situation it's designed for.
Yeah, but it has no BVR capable missiles. It has no BVR capable missiles. The Tomcats are going to absolutely clean house. The Tomcats are going to lock up those Mirages and kill them before the Mirages even know what fucking happened.
Yeah, I suppose it's the question of if they take Tomcats and the Tomcats are working. If they don't take Tomcats, then...
even then, it's F4. It's F4 Phantom 2s. Get fucked, you Mirage fabbing asses. Sparrow and AM9 go burr. I don't care. It's the USN. They are fucked.
I'm saying they might have more issues than we would think right off the bat.
A little, but nothing untoward. I mean, they do better than we did. Easy.
Well, yeah, but that's like saying a Marine could beat up a child in a fight better than a child.
Well, yes, I get that, but the point still stands. The US is going to walk into the Falklands and dare the Argentinians to try and fight them. The Argentine Navy and Air Force, when they realise they're fighting the US and not the British, just nope. They may just nope out of there. Like, sending in Belgrano against the British? Yeah, that's a tactically sound play, given what you know about British capabilities. Given that they weren't entirely convinced there were nuclear submarines in theatre. If you've got things like US assets in theatre, Belgrano can be sunk by a nuclear submarine, it can be sunk by strikes from independence, it can be sunk by Tomahawk from any number of US cruisers, or Harpoon from any number of US cruisers. Like, I
think the main thing is that, like, you know, the way this fight is going to go against an American carrier battle group in this period is it's going to show up. You're not going to be able to find it because Argentine electronic war, like the recon, ELINT and EW capabilities, going to be far behind what the Americans can manage, or they're just going to lose their ELINT assets, and then they're just going to get their air bases hit, you know, one after the other, either by A6s or Tomahawk land attack cruise missiles that they cannot effectively defend against.
Honestly, Cinco de Mayo is probably going to die.
Just be losing the information war.
Honestly, Cinco de Mayo is probably going to die.
That's not even mentioning like long-range bomber missions from the U.S., you know, backed up by tanker aircraft.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just going to be a slaughter, and the Argentines aren't going to have much of a chance to actually be offensive themselves or be even doing much of an active defense.
Yeah, I mean,
they're just such a massive ability gap.
Oh yeah, and I mean, it gets even worse because the Argentinian carrier was able to withdraw. Like, I'm sorry, if you've got E2 Sentry, E2 Hawkeye up looking, and you've got US assets looking for her, she will be found and she will be sunk. Like, she's not going to get a chance to run away back to port.
I guess it just might depend on rules of engagement.
Oh no, if it's the US going into the Falklands, like basically as they were planning to do if we didn't succeed, the rules of engagement would be push the Argentinians off the Falklands. That's it. We are using full conflict rules of engagement. You see an Argentinian asset, you sink it. They fucked around, they now need to find out. Because that was the whole thing with the
Americans aren't.
Yeah, that was the whole thing with the US involvement in the Falklands. If the Argentinians beat us, the plan was to go down with an American carrier group and slap them so hard they realize they fucked up. That was the plan. As far as I'm aware, for the US involvement in the Falklands, if it had come to that.
Yeah, it was distinctly not in the interest of the United States to have the UK be beaten in a war and also see considerable reduction in its combat capability in the North Atlantic. It's just not at all. Like it was worth going to bat for the US entirely in that case.
One of these things involved in Grenada. If they send it to the Falklands, what role would this ship play? There's
going to be because there's going to be nothing near the Falklands for it to shoot at.
I will point out that thing does not have the endurance to get to the fucking Falklands. Also,
it'll be carried over there, but then once it's there, I mean, what Argentine ship is getting close enough to get harpooned?
Yeah. like if Argentine ships are getting harpooned, they're getting air launch harpooned.
Yeah, no, I mean, most of them are going to die in port. I mean, that's the reality here.
It's just...
You gotta remember, this is a period when you're talking about dealing with an American carrier strike group, the only country that is not a one-sided slap against is going to be the Soviet Union. That's because they have lots of, nuclear attack missile submarines and a large bomber fleet. That's the reason.
That's basically it, honestly. Yeah.
Don't the Soviets have a ridiculous amount of diesel boats as well?
Yeah, they do.
Whose whole thing is to die but interdict Reforgia long
No,
enough?
no. There's this long-standing myth that's basically come out of Red Storm Rising that the US was going to that the whole thing that the Soviets were going to do was interdict. You know, there would be a second battle of the Atlantic, and the Soviets would be interdicting Reforgia, and that's what they'd be trying to do. No, that is not what the Red Fleet planned to do. The whole point of the Red Fleet is to defend the conflict resolution assets, aka the Russian ballistic missile submarines. The whole point is the Soviet fleet is dominance in their home waters. Basically, NATO is not to be allowed to enter the areas where Soviet ballistic missile submarines are operating. They are not to be allowed to close on the Soviet coast, and in a limited way to secure northern Norway, to allow more access for Soviet long-range maritime patrol aircraft and strike assets. The Soviet fleet is not looking to leave its home area. It's not looking to tangle with NATO in the North Sea. That is not what the Red Fleet is looking to do. Protection. Their most vital thing is protect the conflict resolution assets, because that was the whole thing that the Soviet boomers were meant to do. It's like, yes, USA, you know where our ICBMs are, you know where our bomber bases are, you do not know where our SSBNs are. And you can't get to them.
Theoretically.
Yeah, theoretically, and you can't get to them even if you do know where they are.
Once again, theoretically.
No, like I'm sorry, but trying to that's what those diesel boats are for. To sit and basically, if they hear an American submarine trying to enter the Bastion or trying to break through into the Red Fleet zone, lob a wire-guided torpedo at it, and then lob some more, and alert the nuke boats that the fucker is coming. This is the thing. Like, any attempt at NATO penetration into the Bastions is not suicidal, but there's a reason the Seawolf was created. There's a reason the Seawolf is just that fucking capable as a submarine. Because it fucking had to be. To get into those bastions and survive. That's about right, Phoenix, wouldn't you say? There's a reason that
yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I mean that was that was their war termination capability in those SSBNs, whether it was to prevent a Soviet defeat or to secure a Soviet victory, and to maintain a deterrence against the United States even during the conflict. You know, very much not only just a peacetime deterrent, but also an inter-conflict deterrence. And yeah, that was the whole point of the Soviet fleet, was just in the bomber forces, just protect the SSBN bastions. And there's also, when it comes to the Soviets' view towards American carriers, they also long believed, which was true for a few years, that American carriers were nuclear delivery devices. Like, that would be part of the way the Americans would deliver nuclear strikes against Russian territory. And this very much fits in Soviet doctrine, because the Soviets viewed nuclear war as something. They did view nuclear war as a war-fighting endeavor, right? You are actually fighting with nuclear weapons. It's not just purely strategic system. So you want to destroy enemy launch systems to prevent them from attacking your homeland, as a general rule. Damage limitation is a rule, not like a maybe. So this is why, like, they were talking about, yes, we're going to throw an entire bomber division at a single carrier battle group, that's basically 100 bombers per carrier. Not all of them carrying missiles, but 100 bombers per carrier, which. The math did not work out for the Soviets very well in that, because they only could manage about 6 bomber divisions between the MRA and the VKS, and the Americans had 15 carrier battle groups by themselves. Yeah.
We've gone off on a few different
granted,
tangents.
We're talking. Yeah, I mean, granted, if we're talking about in general, like, it's not like the Soviets would have left everything alone outside of that. I mean, they would have sent some of the conventional submarines down to the North Sea and maybe to the North Atlantic just to delay the Allies or cause havoc, do something productive. But that was never going to be their main focus. It was always, defend our bastions, because that was just so critical to Soviet survival as they saw it.
Like, the reason you get things like the Papas and the Oscars is not what a lot of people have come to think, which is to attack convoys from long range with missiles. No. The whole reason you get the Papas and the Oscars is they will know when the carrier strike groups are going to get hit. And suddenly, as it's happening, and as they're dealing with vampires from airborne aircraft, suddenly a bunch of cruise missiles appear from nowhere. Oh yeah, 2 Oscars have been shadowing your carrier strike group, and they're also firing off their missiles as well.
To be fair, does anyone actually really think that the Soviet submarines would be used as a Battle of Atlantic style thing?
Yes, it's become a massive...
This is the first time I've ever heard of that.
It's become a massive thing because of Red Storm Rising. It's become a massively popular thing that this is what people think the Soviets were going to
It's
do.
hard enough to find people who even know what Red Storm Rising even is, I find. But so for that apparently spread it, that is fascinating.
Yeah, it's become a whole thing that everyone assumes that the Soviets would try and stop the Reforger convoys and everything else.
Well, I would say it's more because Red Storm Rising is derivative of what was believed around that time. You gotta remember, for most of the Cold War, NATO did think the Soviets were planning to fight another Battle of the Atlantic. This was the CIA conclusion as well. And that, the Soviets, what the Soviets were building around. That's why Red Storm Rising is written the way it is. It is reflective of that. It's really like CNA's work, Center for Naval Analysis, that kind of was watching what the Soviets were talking about, what they were building, and said, hey, no, this is not the direction they're going. This is not what they actually want to do. This is why you get the whole new maritime strategy at the end of the 1970s, which is kind of what underpins a lot of what was built, what was starting to be built prior to the Reagan administration, and then also kind of underpins a lot of what was in the 600 Navy thing. This is why you get the drive towards Aegis, and the ability to do outer air battle and have your destroyer escorting the carriers, able to just handle all the missiles, and that way the air fighters don't have to worry about attacking or shooting down missiles, all that stuff. That was this new offensive shift where the Americans had, which was basically designed to go out, lure out the Soviet bomber forces and destroy them. That was why that shift happened. They realized this was not the case, but prior to that, like when you're talking about like the 70s and before, we very much thought that was what the Soviets were basically doing, what Red Storm Rising was talking about, a counter reforger, strangle Europe, and which is why you see like the huge swarm of really cheap, shitty ASW escorts. I don't want to say shitty, but like low-end ASW escorts that can't. What frigates initially were in the early Cold War, which basically they're not useful for fighting enemy surface ships or enemy surface units. They don't have the speed or the endurance. They're really just there to be built in large numbers and sit by as convoy escorts. This is where you have fleet destroyers, DD, not DDG, that are your major fleet ASW assets. While you also have DDGs that do air warfare and ASW, or cruisers that do both as well. It was reasons also why you only really see specialist ASW frigates that are meant to serve as fleet escorts really appear in the 70s, 80s, and beyond in Europe.
Makes sense. I think I understand.
You have a question from General.
Right, so just to clarify, Red Storm Rising isn't indicative of Soviet doctrine.
No,
it's
it is
indicative of what NATO at the time thought Soviet doctrine was.
No, it's what NATO. Well, no, it's what.
Isn't that literally what Phoenix just said, though?
No, it's what NATO 5 years before the book was published thought, which is therefore publicly available knowledge. But yes, basically.
Yeah. Okay.
The Alphas. Also, what role did the Alphas play if the Cold War went hot? Oh, the Alphas are interceptors. Is if you find a high-value contact that you need dead, like if you found a NATO SSBN, or if a NATO submarine has breached the cordon and is making its way towards a known position of one of your SSBNs, you ring up an Alpha and it blitzes out at 45 knots to go and kill that bloody NATO high-value target. That is the point of an Alpha. It is an underwater interceptor. I'll let Phoenix say. Phoenix, am I right on that?
I don't care who As far as I know, pretty much. I mean, I think there was also a whole thing about it being able to like outrun a lot of ASW torpedoes at the time, or up until newer models came out. But yeah, pretty much. I mean, there was the whole thing. They could just go fast and they didn't care about being heard.
Yeah,
because that's the thing. In any submarine, if you go fast, you're going to be heard. Slow
Yeah.
noise, you can't get around that. But
it's like
they
the Alpha
distinctly did not care about that.
Yeah, the
for
Alpha's
those
like, oh, you
designs.
can hear us. Good for you. Now try killing us.
Yeah. I am faster than your projectile.
You're like a car crash in slow motion. Yeah, the Alpha's made of titanium alloy. Yeah. With a liquid sodium reactor. The Alphas are cranked.
You gotta say one thing with the Soviets. They had balls when they were designing submarines. I mean, holy cow.
I mean, yeah, like one thing you
I
can't.
don't know if I'd want to be in one, but
It will not surprise you to learn all of the Alphas are now gone.
What?
ah,
Oh.
And literally all of them went in basically 1990, as the Soviet Union was falling.
Yeah, how fucking expensive were they?
Very.
why?
'Cause that sort of tech don't come cheap, boy.
And you basically got something that could do fairly similar work, but didn't cost an arm and a leg. Which was the Akulas.
But you can be nice about Soviet equipment.
Like, I'll tell you one thing, there is nothing wrong with an Akula. I do like the Akulas as attack boats. I really, really do. And it has nothing to do with the fact that I played Dangerous Waters a lot as a kid, and the Akula is my favourite ship to play in. Anyone here know Dangerous Waters?
Nope.
Is it like Cold Waters but gay?
No, it's based off a...
That was oddly specific.
no,
It's
no.
Fox's usual insult.
Who are you? What that...
Hmm?
Oh, I was trying to make a joke and I forgot the name of the person who I needed to make the joke.
Brilliant.
I know, it's fantastic, isn't it?
Lamal.
Certified fleet moment.
Yeah, that's about right. I mean, the Akulas will make 35 knots submerged. Very nice. And then, of course, you've got the Ascends.
Wait, so does that mean fleet? Fleet? Did you just do a Joe Biden?
Oh, please. Dangerous Waters wasn't quite Cold Waters in the mid-2000s, because you could also be a P-3 Orion, an Oliver Hazard Perry-class corvette, a Los Angeles class 688I, a Seawolf, and a Seahawk helicopter.
I would point out the only thing you can't be of those norm is the Orion. With a couple of mods, you can play basically everything else.
And you can't be the Seahawk either.
Cold Waters. You can't be anything flying, though I think you can use Seahawks.
Oh,
potentially. You can
and,
just use some stuff.
oh, sorry, yeah, and you can be the Kilo or improved Kilos. Like, being a Kilo was fun. Sneaky, sneaky diesel submarine popping a torpedo into your anus. Haha, you can't escape.
Yeah, shame you couldn't play a Gotland.
It's basically built off the engine that was used to create Command Modern Air Naval Operations, which was incredibly fun. Have we got any more questions?
Yes, you missed one from Gunnery Officer.
Which one?
What are your thoughts on the
this?
P-39 Aerocobra?
Honestly, it existed.
Do you think they're underwhelming or one of the worst single-engine fighters of World War II?
Okay, they
the
weren't
reasons
one
why
of the
they weren't
worst
used
single-engine
against
fighters of World War II. They were just...
Oh no, I'd argue they were. I would argue, as their initial intention, they are definitely one of the worst single-engine fighters, in my opinion. Because they're meant to be a fighter. They are designed to kill other planes at various altitudes, including high altitude, and they were god-awful at it. Now, they had other uses, like they were pretty decent at low altitude fighting against slower planes, and also they were pretty decent at ground attack. And as a fighter, I do think they are pretty rubbish.
Fuck, I wasn't muted for that.
Thankfully, didn't really much, but because there's a reason why the Royal Navy, not Royal Navy, sorry, the Royal Air Force rejected them, and the Royal Navy were very confused when they were given one for testing. But
well, to be fair, it was a really bad aircraft for the RAF.
Yeah,
and not what they were looking for.
Well, it also doesn't help that they were initially the one they were given as a test plane to see whether they wanted it was a pristine plane made basically to the perfect specifications it could be. So it was like, this is brilliant. Get to the next one, it gets the actual production lot. These are much worse than what we used previously.
Yeah, that's about right.
The Portuguese also had issues and various others. But the Soviets liked them.
Yeah,
I won't call them the worst, because the worst is stuff like the Baltimore Pole Defiant.
You
right.
got.
I class them as, it's why I said I class them as one of the worst. I wouldn't say they are the absolute worst, but they're definitely in the category of worst single-engine fighters, in my opinion. Yeah, basically, from what I'm reading, every nation apart from the Soviet Union did not like the P-39. The French didn't like them, the Australians didn't like them, the Italians didn't like them, the Portuguese just constantly had problems with them. Not overly sure what the Americans actually thought, but from what I'm aware, they didn't like using them too much, so...
That's how I thought when it comes in, the Americans are more like plain is plain.
Yeah.
Because they've still got stuff like the pea shooter and infantry in use.
Classes thoroughly outclassed by Japanese fighters, but performed well in strafing and bombing roles. Right, fine. But basically effective at shooting small things on the ground. Which is not really what a fighter's meant to do, to be honest. Sea power? I'd have to investigate what that is. Oh, naval combat in the Missile Age. Right, Not one I care about. Something Fleet might like, but... And speaking of Fleet, we seem to have lost him. It has seemingly gone very quiet.
Not good.
Someone say something very gay.
Why is that your go-to insult at the moment? Or go-to sort of line at the moment? Ay.
Arriba.
That is indeed train. I have no clue what type, because it's not really the time period I'm versed in, nor am I more versed in American logos at that point, but...
That is not
at
a
least it didn't
train.
fly, it is a train.
That is not a train.
No,
It is.
space
There's a
station.
It's got a train and a couple of wagons, so since it's got wagons, it's no longer classed as a locomotive. So they are at least technically classed as trains. Do you think the Japanese Longlance is the best torpedo of World War II for ship or submarine launched? No.
That goes for Mark 13. Only because it's got the best hero to villain story.
You mean 14?
Mark 14. 13 was a sub-launch version, wasn't it?
No, 13 was a different one, I think, wasn't it?
13, I think, is air launched.
Yeah, I was going to say 13, I think, is the air-launched version.
Ah, the 14 was a sub-launched.
Well, 14 was, yeah. 14 was primarily the submarine one. Though, I want to say they might have also used it on destroyers, but...
Wait,
I don't know
12
that
was
To be perfectly
AD.
honest, we're talking about submarine. Are we talking about torpedoes in general?
It says a
Gotta
best torpedo for
say
ship
for, like, the
or
most-
submarine. So, I guess both categories you could choose.
For like a good solid all-around torpedo, I have to say like the British Mark 9, pretty friggin' good. Like all considering like in terms of like as far as surface launch torpedoes go, like in terms of actual speed and range performance, warhead weight, and just general reliability, like didn't have any outstanding bad issues. The British had just done a pretty good job of getting the standard propulsion system down even more than anything that exotic. And like, you know, let's say you like using the base version, you know, that'll go like almost 10,000 yards at 35 knots with a 340 kilogram TNT warhead, which is entirely adequate. Hell, if you get the late war version, you can do 10,000 meters at 41 knots, and for 35 knots, you get about a 13,700 meter run. Which is, you know, these are perfectly fine. I mean, it's kind of the dirty thing about
the later
torpedoes.
ones.
Oh, yeah, the later one, absolutely. You're talking about either a 327 kilogram TNT warhead or a 365 kilogram Torpex warhead, which is all kinds of spicy from 1943 on. You know, and just for the sake of comparison, right, like a Mark 15, Mod 0, which goes in service in 1935, which is about when you get to 21-inch Marks 9 with a single asterisk. I'm not sure how the asterisk is meant to be said. It's a 224 kilogram TNT warhead. You make a little bit over 9,000 meters at 33.5 knots. And then the Mark 15 Mod 3 that entered service in 1943, right, that's got a 363 kilogram TNT warhead or a 373 kilogram HBX warhead. And that'll do 8,200 meters at 33.5 knots or 12,800 meters at 26.5 knots. So, like, you know, it has more bang than the Mark 21, than the 21 Mark 9, the 21-inch Mark 9 with the 2 asterisks, just 43 version, but like, you know, not as good speed or range. And to be frank, like, when you're talking about torpedo delivery, there's always the focus on, you know, to have extreme range or speed, which is like, you know, other thing with the Japanese, but like, the most if you're firing torpedoes at long range, they're generally not very effective. They're more dissuasive salvos than anything. You'll fire a ton of them without getting very many hits, if any hits at all. Most long-range torpedo salvos in World War II just don't get any hits. Like Java C, for example, the one really big long-range salvo the Japanese did, which was like a single shot of like 90.
Oh, you broke up there for a second.
Small number. Close, and by close, I mean like you're launching at ranges of 3,000 meters or less.
Yeah, we can hear you, Fleet.
Where
Good.
I'm gonna keep quiet so I don't interrupt him.
No, I wasn't saying anything. I just wanted to make, because people were breaking up. Wanted to let people know that they were.
You've been quiet for quite some time.
Oh,
Oh yeah, I've just been listening.
Yeah.
Like
Ah,
people
fair
are talking.
okay, sorry, I thought you were on a call or something. My bad.
No.
Okay, yeah, no, so, yeah, like, torpedo delivery tended to be, like, the most effective attacks, especially, which it was especially the case at night, where it's always at relatively close ranges, so you really didn't need the kind of absurd ranges that you action before decisive battle, and also in the daylight action as soon as decisive battle started. And it was this very specific use case that really was not generally used during the war and wasn't especially effective. So like, I tend to find the long lances pretty overrated, especially considering their issues with survivability of the ship hosting them. And I think the British torpedoes are just very, very solid performance all around, without much in the way of complaints. And the French torpedoes also look relatively nice, but you don't really get French torpedo development after after the start of the war, unfortunately, because they had very centimeter, or a little bit of like, what is that? Which is 21.6 inches was the standard 26-inch, but they were also very long because of that. Like the 23 DT model, which was introduced in 2025 and was their main torpedo model before going into World War II. 8.20 meters, which is quite lengthy considering most torpedoes use 7.5 meters or less. When the 21 inch.
But honestly, I hadn't actually thought of the British torpedo being that great in the war, because I've only ever heard of it being referred to as just a pretty decent torpedo.
To be honest,
not bad, not good. It just gets the job done. But I guess
that's what
compared to some others, being good enough is all you need.
I think that's really all that you want. Cause remember, like the whole thing with so this goes to almost any weapon system, right? Like, it doesn't matter how fantastic it is. It's like can it do the job? Can you afford to build a lot of them? And will it be reliable in service, right? And so pursuing will it be a threat to yourself, right? So do you really want to pursue the latest and greatest? Obviously, yes, you want to pursue that in a technical degree, like you want to have the capacity to go for that if you need to, but like what you actually produce and put into mass service, best is often the enemy of good enough. And it was a good enough torpedo and very solid performance all around. It put plenty of Axis ships down, for sure. Like if you told me you have to go into war or best all-around performance for almost the entire war, without having any major issues crop up, or just being massive overperforming versus what you actually need, and very explosive in the case of the 61 centimeter type long lances.
It's just the fact that they are so dangerous to the actual ship itself really would put me off.
Yeah.
Especially say just taking a British example, where a lot of British ships were subject to potential air attacks. If even one or two of those bombs hit near the torpedo, that could end disastrously.
Yeah, and I mean the whole running quiet without bubble trail is great, but the range on Japanese torpedoes was completely excessive to what was, generally speaking, what you were going to be using, and the speed was yes.
Makes sense.
Average miss distance or relative speed of torpedoes, you need absurd speeds for that to be a meaningful difference in terms of single shot hit probability when it comes to making a torpedo faster. And when I mean insane speeds, I mean because if you look at old textbooks that actually talk about this, right, and because they use it's just hard math at the end of the day in terms of distance, travel, effective distance, and speed, fuel usage, weight, all that. You need torpedoes with speeds over 100 knots to make significant differences, and that's at relatively low ranges, 6. If you want to have a same kind of single shot hit probability of a 30 knot torpedo at 2,000 meters or less, you need to be if you're at 6,000 or 6,500 meters, it's something over 100 knots. on longer
That's
ranges, it just gets to absurd
ridiculous.
speed requirements. So just why bother, right?
Yeah,
There are
makes
other
sense.
factors with torpedo that you can improve, which is why I just think it's just not. You know, if it's world, like it's just the mathematics of how torpedo warfare works in reality is just very different from like World of Warship style. Like, yes, the torpedo speed is massive because otherwise the ship will turn on a dime and get out of the way or whatever. You know, it's just.
Don't remind me. Looks at what's called some of the pan-European, but technically Swedish destroyers. Ah, yes. What's this torpedo speed? 96 knots. Trying to dodge those things is not fun. But at least
Oh,
I can.
God, yeah. And I remember when World of Warships used to have the general rule of yes, torpedo speed is you take the IRL speed of the torpedo and you add 20 knots. Granted, speed in the game is not actually knots; it's like knots times 5s for everything. It's all relative.
Yeah, it's because also everything's compressed.
But like, yeah, you know, yeah,
like ships
but like
are faster,
relative, like in terms of torpedo.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, but yeah, no, like and like an insanely high speed but short range run for a torpedo. Like I think the highest speeds you really get is like 50 knots for like, which on a Type 90 on a Japanese long lance, right? Which is just
Which is go back to warships for a second. It's always something.
Yeah, which is like, you know, like a perfectly effective range for torpedo, but like, you know.
To go back to warships for a second, it's interesting that the Type 93 was partially useful because it does have this whole hard to see, almost bubbleless weight thing. Yet in World of Warships, it is the most detectable torpedo the Japanese have.
Yeah, well, if I'm not mistaken, it
has to have high detectability so you can counter it.
Yeah.
It's just slightly amusing.
But that's just game balance. That's not.
I know, I just find it slightly amusing and ironic that torpedo that was relatively famous for being hard to see, in-game, easiest torpedo to see. What are your thoughts on the Mach 37 torpedo? I've got no clue, I'm afraid. That's
the big guided one, isn't it?
If that's big, it looks pretty small to me.
Is that the heli launched one?
Oh no! Oh that.
I can see it being a heli.
Oh, that's the Mach 37.
But yeah, the question is, what are your thoughts on the Mach 37?
It was abysmal. It was utterly abysmal. Why the US adopted it when other navies were adopting
none of the job.
Yeah, like why the US adopted it when the Russians were fielding full-size torpedoes of decent speed that were homing is beyond me.
Because homing's hard, my guy.
Like, I'm sorry, the Russians. The Russians were fielding torpedoes.
It is, but like, why would you force yourself? Yeah. Sorry, continue. I'm interrupting.
Like the Russians were fielding torpedoes that could run at 30 knots and home with decent endurance. The Mach 37 does 19, and that's on the fast setting.
I was going to say, I'm pretty sure certain ships of the period could have probably outrun that.
Yeah, no, like you realize that.
It wasn't meant for ships; it was meant for submarines.
Oh yeah, the US.
I'm pretty sure even a couple of submarines.
Oh yeah, there are
all of them basically.
Well, this is the insane thing. They didn't want to use the full bore of a torpedo tube like a standard 21-inch. So
yeah, it's bizarre. It's really
when they designed
bizarre.
a torpedo in terms of what you can fit in the torpedo in terms of warhead power, weight, guidance, and they just voluntarily gave up a ton of volume. I haven't really read into the development of the torpedo, so I really can't comment besides just saying I'm aghast at the fact they did it. But I can't really speak to the actual rationale and logic they had behind it.
Like it's one of
just
the
pure memes. I don't know.
Yeah, it's one of the few memes where you can point at the US and go, they fucked up in the Cold War period. It's one of very few US fuck-ups during the Cold War period.
Because not only then is it smaller in diameter, it also looks pretty short as well. It's a very squat torpedo, so even less.
Please tell me it was like heli launched or something.
No,
I think.
No, it's submarine
launched. What do you mean?
That was ship launched?
No, it's submarine launched.
Jeez.
That's what I've been saying.
Something went wrong here.
everything.
Are we sure they didn't accidentally read a helicopter-launched torpedo
Well, no.
as a ship-launched torpedo
the
and got it
helicopter-
really
This
badly
was just
mixed
too
up?
damn fat to be helicopter launched. But yeah, this was a submarine launched specifically anti-submarine torpedo for submarines.
God,
Did
that is awful. It's worse than I even thought.
Oh yeah, it's significantly bad.
Dear God, yeah, Yankee Doodle, what the fuck?
It just, you
Ugh.
do.
I guess occasionally they have to
There-
have
Right.
My
one or
tiny
two
mistake is just the
mistakes.
CIA.
But
Good fucking
I
God.
don't think they had much control over the torpedo development, though.
Oh no.
At least this one.
Like Guppy subs used it, Nuke subs used it. It was only replaced by the Mark 48. Like it took the Mark 48 to replace it. Yes, we are all glad that the Mark 48 replaced it.
I mean, they weren't the only country to screw up a torpedo development in this period. Like
Hello.
early spearfish, like tigerfish and early spearfish, but
Yeah.
you know,
But
it's the Mark 37
but
definitely
even then,
stands
at
out.
least tigerfish could actually move at a speed above walking pace.
That is a real stinker.
Mistake you didn't.
It's very funny.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, it can. Oh yeah, the Mark 45 nuclear torpedo. It's just.
How did it enter service again? 1956. So what the SSS? Yeah.
I'm sorry, have you ever
Sorry,
heard
I'm
of
going
the
to myself.
Condor air-to-air nuclear missile?
Oh yeah, that's really
So a
funny.
nuclear rocket.
Nuke. We don't need single shot PK. We just need nuke.
Look,
4 or 5.
all I'm saying is if we fire a nuke at that area of interference, the interference will
Considering
go
the shortcomings
away.
of some of the weapons, like beam guided SAMs in that area, you kind of understand why they were like, you know what? Let's just make it even a nuclear tip. I mean, hell, the Russians still have a bunch of nuclear tipped surface-to-air missiles for defense of Moscow against ballistic missiles.
Yeah, they do have that. It's very sad. Right, I'm going to take one last question, and then we're going to wrap up for the evening because I would like to also do some gaming before I go to bed tonight.
Oh god.
So I have to run soon anyways, too, so...
So let me
Map
just
Good timing.
spreading.
let me pick a good one then. Let me have a look. Oh, actually, yeah, this is a good topic of discussion. Are we stoked about the new upcoming Sea Power game? I am. I'm very stoked.
I had basically not even heard of it,
very.
so I
I
have
am
basically
very
no
stoked.
interest.
It is modern naval warfare game with very, very
They're
close
really.
attention paid to like how sensor systems work. Like I know one of the guys who's working on developing it, and man, like
I also love how wide.
they're cooking. They're cooking.
I also love how wide they're casting the net. It's not just fighting Cold War gone hot. I love how wide they're casting that, and I also love how they've also gone, you know what will be fun? Let's give the Russians and other people some toys they never actually had. Like, the Orel class carrier, things like that. And it opens the way for modding as well. Like, you want to give the British battleships? Sure. You want to throw the Russians a Stalingrad cruiser? Why not? Just... Because, like, and thing is, like, the advantage is that the systems for naval gunnery on that scale are in the game because the Iowas exist. So in theory, if you want to, you could, in theory, if for God knows why you would, but if you want to, you could mod in a Sovietsky Soyuz and have a Sovietsky Soyuz and an Iowa blat each other with gunfire for the memes.
I mean, I would want to just for the sake of seeing the Soyuz get blown apart, but that's just me.
Like, it would be fun. I mean, even more fun though would be having both ships leading a SAG and seeing how the two SAGs would fare off and who would win.
Mm.
I think I know who has my bets on that one.
Oh yeah, it's going to be the US, but
And
still.
it's not the Soyuz.
But yeah, it's genuinely going to be insane fun.
Oh yeah.
Like it's like we've got Vietnam era warfare. We actually have ground combat included and simulated, but not visible. So it's basically Dangerous Waters Plus, which is fantastic. It no, it's not multiplayer capable, sadly, which is a shame. It'll if it does get multiplayer, it'll be a UAD setup where multiplayer will
that
come
reminds me.
much later.
Yeah, that reminds me. I need to see how that UAD's multiplayer is going. See if that's had any more mention. That still sounds fascinating.
Of course, the diehards are actually. Of course, as per usual, you have multiplayer.
Did he cut out for anyone else there?
Yep.
Right. Okay.
Oh yeah, they're all.
Mammoth
I
Mark
gotta
2.
run, so I'll see you guys around.
Well, thanks,
Bye for
folks.
now.
I hope you've all enjoyed this ramblings. We will have normal schedule back on Monday, so stay tuned for that. We'll be keeping an eye on Drac and their colleagues as they go through Finland, where I just was. And I hope you all take care, and I'll catch you next time. Stick around. I'm going to be hovering in event room, possibly doing a gaming event in a minute. I just need 10 minutes to recuperate before I go off again.